Nurse said I was squeamish because I hadn't had children yet. I traumatized her by telling her about the illegal medical testing I endured as a child. This happened a couple of weeks ago. My fertility doctor ordered some blood tests for me. I am a 34-year-old woman, and I went to my local healthcare clinic to get them done. I have trypanophobia, a fear of needles, which I disclosed to the nurse who'd be taking my blood. I always need to warn them because I can handle myself okay for around 10 minutes or so, but if the blood draw takes too long, I'm likely to vomit and or faint. I once very embarrassingly threw up on the nurse's shoes. The nurse looks at me like they don't believe me and asks if I have children. I say no. Keep in mind that the labels for my blood tests have the word infertility in big bold letters, but whatever. The nurse goes on about how I won't be this squeamish once I have kids. I'm pretty annoyed at this point, as I can already feel a bit woozy. So I say very coldly, I didn't used to be squeamish about needles as a kid, which is why the doctors in my home country volunteered me for medical testing and training. My parents got paid while I was used as a human pincushion for medical trainees. I specifically remember the day they taught students how to draw blood from my neck. The nurse turned white and proceeded to wordlessly draw the blood. Because they took so long, I ended up throwing up, which they had to clean up. Maybe next time they'll learn to listen to their patients. Wow, what a start to this subreddit. I mean, this nurse is going on about you having children when your chart has literally specified that you're infertile. Absolutely insane. I mean, to be fair, I'm appalled that they're judging you in any way at all. You're a nurse. Surely you shouldn't judge someone's health issues. That's ridiculous. But great revenge, and I hope that cleanup took a long time because they deserved it. So there we go. If you didn't already know, that is r/traumatized them back, but I've got a lot more posts to come in this one. Let's get into the second. Karen said, boys will be boys. So I return the favor. More than 20 years ago, when me and my sisters were still in elementary, our mum took us to a shopping mall for clothes and groceries. A major supermarket was attached to the mall. After everything was over, we stopped by the bookstore where us kids picked whatever books we wanted while she was picking educational books for both of us. The bookstore was also selling some physical discs for various softwares, including games. While both of us were looking into the games we wanted, a little boy of our age came next to us, opened up one of the discs, and poked my sister in the eye. My sister immediately started to cry her eyes out, and my mum rushed over to see what was happening. She scolded the little boy after hearing what happened, to which he got upset and went to grab his Karen of a mother. Karen comes over and demands to know who yelled at her son. The two ladies began to get into a shouting match. My mum argued the kids had no reason to hurt my sister like that and should be taught better. But Karen argued, boys will be boys and that he doesn't know any better. She asked my mum, why are you overreacting? I decided enough was enough. I did a frontal kick on the kid as hard as I can, making him fall on his butt. I saw there was a nice footprint imprinted on his shirt. He began to let out the most annoying cry I've ever heard. The Karen quickly rushed over to her little turd and began shouting at me. I looked her in the eye and said, boys will be boys. Why are you overreacting? She tried to argue more, but her friend, or maybe her sister, held her back and ushered her out of the store. We went to get burgers and fries afterwards, but my mum also lectured me about how violence isn't the answer. Me being a little sprouty elementary kid didn't care and rode that hype train for weeks. You know what? I actually disagree with your mum. Sometimes I feel like violence has to be the answer, otherwise people don't learn lessons, right? And take that with a lot of context, and the vast majority of the time, it's not the right thing to do. But I feel like once in a blue moon, sometimes that has to be done. Otherwise, no one's ever going to learn. Like, there are very few cases, very few, where violence should be the first response. Very few. But in a situation like this, where this woman is so oblivious to how heinous her children are being, spouting terrible excuses like boys will be boys. And yeah, I can imagine that this thing will continue to happen again and again because her kids aren't being parented correctly. They're not learning what's right and wrong. Perhaps this flying kick, which, let's be honest, probably didn't hurt that much, will actually sort her kids out and will stop them from doing stuff like this in the future. Like, it's educational. If a flying kick could ever be educational, this is it. I didn't look pretty enough 4 hours after my mum died. This happened a really long time ago now, but I've never seen anyone run away from a situation quite so quickly, and sometimes I do wonder what the guy thought, or if he learned his lesson. So my mum had been terminal and was in hospice care in our home. We knew time was limited. However, when I'm upset, the first thing to go to hell is my sleep schedule. I slept 2 hours that night, and I hadn't been getting much more sleep than that for the few weeks preceding this. But she ended up passing slightly before 4 the morning that this took place. So, after she passed, I decided I needed caffeine to get through the day. So when the nearest gas station opened up at 8 AM, I headed over there for some energy drinks. I likely did look a bit of a mess. It is easy to tell when I'm tired, and I was wearing college merch that was much bigger than my usual size. I get out of my car and start shuffling through my clothes. I couldn't remember which gigantic pocket I'd put my wallet in. While I did that, this man pulls up to a pump in a very shiny car. I don't remember what he looked like, beyond that he looked a bit like a very put together game show host. This man turns to me. He was 20 feet away, so this was all said loudly, and says, "It's a shame someone so pretty can't improve everyone's day with a smile." I burst out crying, ugly crying, with the sobbing mouthing and shaking. I just went from standing there hoping I hadn't left my wallet at home to bawling in a mostly empty parking lot. I did manage to yell something like, "I'm sorry I'm not freaking pretty enough for you when my mum died 4 hours ago." The dude turned on his heels and left. Didn't pump gas, didn't go inside for coffee, didn't apologize, just got in his car and left. I was saved from standing in the parking lot sobbing by a woman who I think was jogging and heard what the man and I said to each other, and the employee of the gas station, who were both very kind. Ah man, there we go. I mean, look, that is obviously the deepest story that we've had so far. Goodness me, I just gotta say off the bat, OP, I'm so sorry to hear about your situation and your parents passing, but also just to be in this spot and have someone do this to you. Yeah, absolutely insane. Like, to be fair to the guy, maybe he had good intentions, but you really shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. You shouldn't be putting your nose in someone else's business, especially when they have the expression that I'm sure you had, which was just, you know, being absolutely distraught. It's past the point of not smiling. Surely you look just very, very upset. I mean, from an outlooker looking in, surely you knew that something had gone wrong there. You weren't just being sad or like not smiling. I don't know. I get the feeling he came in with like a positive attitude, but ultimately, yeah, terrible thing to do. Don't assume things about other people. And I hope that this guy learned his lesson. Although I say that, a good man would have just apologized and said, "I'm so sorry. I really had good intentions. I just want people to be positive. It's my bad. I'm so sorry for your loss and that I did that. That's my fault." But actually, no, he ran away, didn't he? He ran away like a little coward. So I take it all back. He's just a disgraceful man. There we go. I will say, though, that the people that helped you in that situation, that has restored my faith in humanity. But once again, OP, I'm so sorry. Let's move on. I was getting tampons, officer. So I got pulled over one night coming back from Walmart. I definitely deserved the ticket for speeding, but the cop was asking for too much information. It was late, I was cramping, I just wanted to be home so I could stop bleeding in my pants and eat my cookies. Of course, the typical question, "Do you know how fast you were going?" "Yes, sir, 65. Where are you coming from?" Okay, fair question, I guess. It is 12 AM. "Walmart, officer." "What were you getting at Walmart?" Okay, why do you need to know that?" "I just want to get home, my guy. But since you asked, I was getting tampons. Do you want to see them?" His eyes got wide and he walked away without saying a word. He came back to give me my ticket and he couldn't make eye contact. Most expensive box of tampons I've ever bought. However, the look on that guy's face was priceless. Now, I agree with you, OP. There's questions that as a police officer, you are obviously allowed to ask and expected to ask. The one about, do you know how fast you're going? That's a standard question, and I think that is a reasonable one. But asking what you were buying at a shop surely is just not relevant information, like at all. Why would an officer ever need to know that? To be honest, I think he should have just not given you the ticket there, just through embarrassment, just held his hands up and said, "Wow, I've been completely done there. I'm not going to ticket you. There you go. Enjoy your day." But no, he still gave you a ticket. What a little rat. Yeah, I get it's the law, but come on, you effed up there. You deserve some form of karma, surely. "My kid can die if I don't." I was waiting to check in at the dentist today, and some old lady started humping and such. We're in Florida, and I'm wearing a mask. Unusual, I guess, but most people just mind their own business and leave me alone. There's a few, however, who are pains about it. She looked at me and asked why I was wearing that thing on my face. Everyone knows that the virus is gone. Why am I out and about if I'm that scared? Now, I have breast cancer, and I'm not feeling great today. Mine's not terrible, considering My son, though, also has cancer, and his is bad. Grade 4 brain cancer. Oh my goodness me, OP, I'm so sorry to hear that. I just looked at her and said, my oncologist says cancer patients need to be careful about dental care. Plus, my kid can die if I don't. She turned sheet white and left me alone the rest of the time we were in the waiting room together. I'm pretty sure the dental hygienist who came out to get me was purposely a bit louder than normal, asking about how my son was doing. Now, this is pretty similar, I think, to the third post we had in this episode. Once again, why are you sticking your nose in someone else's business when you just don't need to be doing it? And also, what is wrong with wearing a mask? If I see someone wearing a mask out and about these days, I say fair play to them, thank you. Either you are ill and you're protecting the rest of the population from getting your illness, or you don't want to get ill yourself. Both great things. Why is that a negative thing? Oh, COVID is done now? Well, first of all, it isn't. Like, my granny had COVID a couple of weeks ago, and the only reason she didn't have it that badly is because she's still getting vaccinated. And secondly, who cares? Let people wear masks. My wife is dead. When my son was born, I was a stay-at-home dad for the first year of his life. We also lived in New York City, and I loved taking him out into the city to do things. Nearly every subway ride, though, I'd have some kind of encounter with a woman or group of women, usually boomers, who would say some variation of giving mum the day off, or so nice to see dad's babysitting once in a while. Now, first off, it's not possible to babysit your own kid. That's called parenting. But second, I was the primary caregiver. Mum was at work, I stayed home with the boy. It got old real fast. But I found a very nice trick that shut these old biddies down real quick. Anytime someone would ask if I was babysitting or giving mum the day off, my face would fall. I'd get real quiet, and after taking a moment to compose myself, I'd say something like, my wife died during childbirth, or my wife is currently undergoing radiation treatment for stage 4 cancer. She's at a clinic in California. I haven't seen her in 6 months. Or my favorite, his mum abandoned us when he was just 6 weeks old. She'd been using drugs pretty heavily while she was pregnant, and so he was born addicted. I didn't hear from his mother for months after she left, until one day I found out she'd overdosed and died. This little guy is all I've got left of her. But we carry on best we can. That shuts them up real quick. Now, I will say that perhaps given the stories we've read earlier in this episode, this might not be like the best thing to do. I think like lying about people dying in your family is maybe a little bit too much, but I completely understand why you did it, OP, and it did have the desired effect. And again, like, you don't have to deal, or you shouldn't have to deal with this complete and utter sexism every single day when you're just being a good dad. So if that's the best way that you thought about, dealing with people like this, then I hold my hands up. There you go. I mean, if it does happen every single day, then that must get unbelievably annoying. I mean, I will say that saying that his mum abandoned us when he was just 6 weeks old, she'd been using drugs pretty heavily, and so he was born addicted. I mean, imagine hearing that. Like, you've just said, oh, it's so nice to see a man doing the job for once, babysitting, and then you hear the guy say that. You've got to be questioning your life at that point. Yeah, it's had the desired effect. Comment on my butt at work. Let me make this uncomfortable for us both. I was working as a front-end cashier for a local grocery store. It was around the time of my lunch break, so my line was closed off after this last customer. Grizzled, 60, 70-year-old, bearded guy. I am in my early 20s, a feminine cashier. As I finish ringing up his purchases and he goes to slide his card, the card machine doesn't work. I tell him to keep swiping until it beeps. We were mid-change to a new sales system, so this was a common occurrence. I bend under my till to clean and organize while he's sliding his card. As I'm bent over, his card dings. Sweet, let's wrap this up so I can go eat. Instead, oh, I liked it when you did that. I'm still under the till. I roll my eyes. And then inspiration strikes. Petty, petty inspiration. I come up. Did what, sir? When you bent over, it worked. I had a confused face. Why? Well, it liked when you bent over. Why would it like that I bent over? It's a boy card. Boys like it when girls bend over. Sorry, I've got to say, this is the creepiest dude I've ever seen on Reddit. What? But why? I ask again. Well, they just do. At this point, I'm gleeful on the inside. But why? I don't understand. The old man is getting flustered. His face gets red. He mumbles, Mom, you're making me a little uncomfortable. I drop the dumb act. I lean forward across the check stand and look right into his eyes. And how do you think I feel when a man makes an unwanted comment on my backside while I'm at work? He is 20 shades of red, stammering. I meant no disrespect. It was supposed to be a compliment. I put on a very stern face. Well, it was disrespectful. Please don't comment on women's bodies when they work. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. He collects his bag and leaves without another word. Gleeful vindication. Good. Now maybe you won't go and harass other people at their frickin' jobs. Well, yeah, creepiest guy ever. Literally the creepiest guy ever. Well done, OP, for not just being quiet. I mean, it must be pretty, horribly uncomfortable in situations like this. And you just want to stay quiet and just say, okay, fine, I'll ring you up, go, leave the store. But no, you did the right thing. I mean, fair play. It's very brave to do that, courageous. I can't even imagine being in this situation. Just try and do your job and getting harassed by people 50 years older than you. I mean, by the way, brother, you got no chance anyway. What are you doing? Go home to your old people's home and just sit in your chair and do the Sudoku, my friend. And by the way, I quite like Sudokus. So that's not a slight on people that do Sudokus, but it is a slight on creeps. I served my sister-in-law a child's plate after she broke multiple heirloom china plates. I caught her breaking them on camera. My husband and I have family dinners at our house every month or so with our family. I have some sets of fine china that I like to switch out between the seasons that I've inherited from my grandmother. When we have our get-togethers, I serve dinner on these plates. My mother-in-law compliments them every time. My sister-in-law, however, has made comments to me that they're not her style. I honestly didn't think twice about her comments up until this past February, when one of my plates was put in the sink, broken. I chalked it up to an accident. In April, we had another dinner. This time, my sister-in-law was carrying both her and her boyfriend's plates to the sink and accidentally dropped them both. Again, no biggie at all. In May, she broke 2 more plates, and in June, she broke a plate and a cup. At this point, I was catching on. I brought up these concerns to my husband, and he brushed them off as accidents. I told my mum, and she said that she thought that my sister-in-law was doing it on purpose, and she got me a camera to put in the dining room. In July, we had dinner, and I had an opportunity arise. My mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and her boyfriend joined us for dinner. While our plates were still on the table, my mother-in-law asked how my plants were doing, and I said I'd show her. I told my husband to follow us outside so he could show her the plant that he's growing, leaving my sister-in-law alone with her boyfriend. When we came back inside, 5 minutes later, her plate was broken. When they left, I pulled up the camera footage. I saw her stand up when we walked out, peek around the corner, and then throw the plate on the ground. I kept this video to myself. All I'll say at this point is, are you sure she's not Greek and it's just tradition? I jest. This brings me to this past weekend. We had our family dinner and we were joined by my in-laws, my sister-in-law and her boyfriend, as well as my parents, siblings and niece. I served everyone, saving evil sister-in-law for last. I brought her food out on a child's plate with a sippy cup and got those kids' silverware with the plastic handles. She looked at me confused and said, I think you mixed my plates up with your niece's plates. And I said, no. My niece is responsible enough to eat on a grown-up's plate. If you're gonna act like a child in my home, I'm gonna treat you like a child in my home. She tried to play coy, but I had my iPad ready and I played the video to everyone at the table. She started sobbing. She swiped the kid's plate off the table and stormed out. My in-laws both apologized and offered to pay for replacement plates, but I told them not to worry about it. Despite this, we still had a nice time. When everyone left, my husband told me I was out of line and cruel, but I told him that this has been happening for months and I've told him it was bothering me multiple times. It's Wednesday, he's still being a little cold to me, and I also got a text from my sister-in-law's boyfriend asking me if I'd apologize to her because I really embarrassed her. I sent him the video again and he left me on red. My husband just called me to ask if I was taunting her boyfriend because his sister called him crying that I was. Now somebody has asked in the comments down below, inquiring minds need to know, why would she break your plates? Because she doesn't like to eat off something that's not her style? Yeah, I agree. That is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. How can you have a style of plate that you like or dislike at someone else's house? Opie replied, I would like to know too. I'll probably never get a straight answer though. My husband apologized and now we're bouncing back and forth off of the whys and we're kind of circling around to the boyfriend. My in-laws say that's when they've noticed a behavior change. She's gotten into trouble since dating him. They act like teenagers. My husband is saying exactly what I was thinking was happening. He's trying not to blame or pin anything on her because she has been behaving differently over the past few months. She got caught shoplifting, and her boyfriend also got caught stealing and went to jail. No diagnosis that I've ever known of, but the family is now saying there could be a deeper issue or possibly a substance issue. Someone else also commented, "I'm glad that your husband apologized. What made him come around, if I may ask?" OP said, "My mother-in-law. At least I'm assuming. She texted me that they were on the phone when he was on his way home. That's my bet. I really want to talk to him about all of this, but I don't want to overwhelm him, especially because he's been a little distant. I think the whole thing is overwhelming for him. He told me his sister called him 4 times. I'm keeping it low-key for now, but I'm going to try and get some answers about the plate breaking." All right, then there we go. Quite a long story. The good thing about r/traumatized them back is that you do get some short, fun posts. I don't know if fun's the best word there, but snappy little ones that you don't have to concentrate on too much. And then you get some longer, more in-depth ones like this. I just want to know what is wrong with the plates. I really do. How can the style of a plate have that much of an effect on someone's life to the extent that they want to break them? I mean, absolutely insane. Shout out your mother-in-law, by the way. Like, what a goat. Saying, you know what, I know what's going on here. Here's a secret camera. Set it up. Let's watch this back together. Oh, actually, it was your mum, wasn't it? But still, I feel like your mum and your mother-in-law both did well here. Your sister-in-law, less so. I do kind of feel like your husband, though, took a lot of convincing here. When she'd broken 6 or 7 pieces of heirloom china, yet, apparently, according to him, you're in the wrong for embarrassing her. Where's the logic there, my friend? I mean, yes, it's good that he's come around, but it should not have taken him that long. And now for our final r/traumatized them back of this episode. Mother tries to spank teenager and regrets it. I'm well into being an adult today, and this is a story of how I stopped my mother from ever spanking me again. My mother has always been fond of physical punishment. She's a pusher, slapper, hit with random objector, and a spanker. I got spanked a lot for things I did, and things that she perceived I did. She spanked me well into being a teenager as well. I was 16 or 17 at the time, and my wet towel from showering was on my bed. My mother always lost her mind over not hanging a towel properly, and frankly, this was a mistake I made often. She came in while I was dressing, saw the towel, and she immediately grabbed and spun me to start spanking. I'll never know what devil took over, but it was a devil that had been needed much sooner in my life. Instead of crying out in pain, I said, and I can't quite believe I'm about to do this, guys, but I will, and I'm going to give it my all here. Oh! She was confused and asked, "What sort of smart-ass response was that?" My response was, "Well, after so many spankings, I was wondering when I would start to enjoy it." She looked horrified, left my room, and I called down the hallway, "Come back, we can take our relationship to the next level." I was never spanked again. I cannot believe I've just read that. That is obviously going to be the conclusion of this episode immediately. Well, despite the fact that I just actually cannot believe what I've just done there, and I'm really sorry if any family members are watching this or listening to this. It's probably my lowest moment in my life so far. That is the perfect example of r/traumatized them back. Your mum now, surely, is living with that trauma. In the back of her mind, yes, she might have thought you were joking long term, but she's always going to have those lingering doubts. Did my son enjoy sexually me spanking him? Makes you think. Really, really does. What happens when neighborhood punks decide to beat up veteran's son? This is actually a story my dad told me about one of his childhood friends, George, who recently passed away. Dad and George grew up in a booming city in what's now known as the Rust Belt. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the major car plant in town. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the plant in town as soon as you got out of high school. George was one of those people. Dad wasn't. Dad accepted a scholarship to his dream school to study engineering. During the weekends and holidays, he'd come home and hang out with his buddies, including George. One afternoon, Dad gets a phone call from Grandma. George had been jumped after work and had the metaphorical tar beaten out of him. For a while, it looked like he wasn't going to make it, but by some miracle, George pulled through. However, he was in such bad shape that he had to retire early and go on disability. While on one of his visits home, George's dad, Walter, pulls Dad aside and asks him if he knows a guy named Flynn. Dad had heard that name and he was one of the local troublemakers. Dad asked Walter why, and Walter revealed that there had been a wallet found by George's body which was given to him. The paramedics thought the wallet was George's. No, I have no idea why they didn't check it. Unfortunately, the city was going through financial difficulties, thanks to corruption and mismanagement, to the point that they didn't have enough money to pay their police officers during the weekends. No, I'm not kidding. From 8 PM Friday night to 6 AM Monday morning, there wasn't a single police officer on duty. Goodness me. Since the assault took place on Friday night, there wasn't much anyone could do. Dad asked Walter what he was going to do about it. Walter looked at him with a stern face and said, "I take care of my own." Walter was an army vet who had served during World War II and Korea. He never spoke about his time, claiming he was a radio technician and never left the base. He never breathed a word to anyone, even George's mother, his wife. The full story never came out until after George's death, when a letter Walter had written before his death was found in George's possessions. After realizing that Flynn was one of the people who had destroyed George's life, Walter got in touch with his friends. He was a personable guy. You know the type, the kind who makes friends in 5 minutes. They all agreed that something had to be done. And thus, Operation George's Revenge was born. Walter and his friends began observation of Flynn and would keep tabs on him. It took several weeks, but eventually Flynn and his buddies, Mac and Zeno, were overheard bragging about the attack. Knowing who to attack, they moved to the next steps. Walter's friends, some of whom worked in high places, decided to make some phone calls to their friends in the plant where all three worked. See, these friends were union. State was a closed shop at the time. And disgusted about what happened to George, they decided to make things difficult for them. They'd remove vital tools for emergency maintenance at the last minute, put them in positions they weren't good in, and rearrange the schedule so they got the worst shifts, to name just a few. They also began a whispering campaign so everyone at the plant knew what had happened. In this city back then, who you knew and what everyone thought you've done was enough to make or break you. The goal was to get them to quit, and after a year or so, all three had, frustrated with how they were being treated. But Walter and his friends aren't done. Not by a long shot. A few phone calls and anonymous letters later, Flynn, Mac and Zeno were unemployable in the district. Because they hadn't been fired, they weren't entitled to severance or anything. Soon, their money ran out, but they couldn't get out of town because everyone knew from the whispering campaign what they'd done to George. For the rest of their lives, Walter and his friends kept an eye on Flynn, Mac and Zeno. Just when it appeared that they had an out, the whisper/letter campaign would start again and they'd be denied an out. The three men ended up homeless and destitute alcoholics who couldn't even get state aid. And this in a state that is known for its generous aid for those in bad straits. Walter and his friends made a contingency plan to continue this until the three men were dead, using the next generation. So those men would never forget what they did to George. Nobody was able to find out anything about Flynn, Mac and Zeno, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're still stuck and miserable. Wow, there we go. What a start to the episode. The best revenge, in my opinion, is revenge that just ruins someone's lives. I say that in a semi-sarcastic way, but ultimately, when it comes down to something like this, in which somebody out there has ruined someone's lives, do they not deserve it back on them? A little bit? I think they might. Before reading this, I thought this was going to be a one-off sort of friendly visit vibe, where, you know, they go and just completely F him up. But no, this was so much better. I mean, Flynn, Mac and Zeno, it sounds hard. I mean, is it too far? Personally, I don't think so. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts. But yeah, very, very justified revenge that lasted a lifetime and hey, still might be continuing. Phenomenal. Now, our next revenge story comes from r/ProRevenge, and it does need a little bit of explaining. Over 2 years ago now, I read out a story titled "Hell Hath No Fury Like Me Scored." It's one of the best posts that I've read from r/ProRevenge. If you guys don't remember it, don't worry, there is a little recap coming at the start of this update, but I'm going to leave a link to the original story, well, me narrating it, down below in the description. So if you do want to check that out first, or you start listening to this and you're not entirely sure what's going on and you want to hear that, click it. It will explain everything. But for now, let's get into part 2 of this one. as I said, over 2 years later. Okay, so here we go. Hello r/ProRevenge. A couple of years ago, I posted a revenge story involving my stepmother, Shanty wife, my stepbrother, Shorty, and my dad, who is now resting in a purple urn. In case you missed it, you can read it here. Again, link down below if you want to hear me narrate it. Well, OP finally has an update. To recap, Shorty, my stepbrother, was my dad's power of attorney while he was sick and had heinously abused his position, stealing a very large sum of money. When I got involved, I got a restraining order against Shorty, filed charges, took over my dad's care, and exacted some sweet revenge in the process. I was warned by the court's victim's advocate, who is my first cousin, because that's how it is in that town, that bringing Shorty to trial for what he did would take a very long time. She was correct. In the meantime, I monitored Shorty's online activities. When he moved out of state, I called the court and let them know just in case it violated his bail. When he got a job as a truck driver, I called the court to let them know he was repeatedly leaving his home state just in case it violated his bail. Then, 6 months ago, I got a call from the same victim's advocate. The trial was going to be set soon, and the court wanted family input regarding possible plea deals and sentencing. He was indicted on felony elder abuse and was facing 15 years in prison. The advocate let me know that the family could request prison time or plea him down to work release with restitution. The upside to prison was obvious, but the downside would be that we would not likely receive restitution since he'd be perpetually poor and in prison. With work release, we would receive restitution, but he would have his freedom. Somewhat. She wanted to know which we preferred. I asked for the night to think it over. Shorty's future rested in my hands, and I wanted to savor it. What kind of god did I want to be? To decide, I needed to do some maths. If he went to prison for 15 years, he'd be out in half or less. Now, 7 years is a long time, but restitution would surely take as long, if not longer, and I would get the pleasure of taking his money every month for years and years and years. I like the thought of him working every day, toiling away in terrible conditions for terrible pay, and him knowing that a portion of that terrible day would be for nothing. I loved the thought that I would be the reason for it. So I called her back and told her we would be okay with the plea deal to felony supervised release and restitution. I didn't hear anything further until last week when the advocate called me again to let me know he'd accepted a deal. The deal. He pled guilty to felony elder exploitation, first degree. He received 15 years, split and suspended, which means he won't serve any jail time. 2 years will be on felony work supervision, where he'll have to call into his parole officer every day and be drug tested almost as frequently. After that, he'll be on regular probation for up to 5 years. The judge will schedule check-ins with him to ensure he's paying restitution and meeting the requirements of his work release and parole. So, what is the restitution? Well, he has to pay back $130,539.39. He was ordered to pay $300 a month beginning 1st of the 1st, 2024. My math gamble paid off. It will take him 36 years to pay that back at $300 a month. If he misses a payment, he will go to jail. I will be in his life for decades, taking back from him bit by bit what he stole. That's unbelievable. So I think that's going to be it. I've done everything I can do, apart from being there to catch him if he violates the terms of his release. Thank you for reading this tangled web of revenge. I hope it warms your heart for the holidays. Well, that right there, guys, is genuinely a Christmas miracle. I mean, not just the fact that it's a phenomenal story, but that update is just so good. I mean, how many times, right, have people said, written, at the bottom of their post on Reddit, I'll update you guys if I get any further news or if things happen, etc, etc. And obviously they must, right, at some point. I mean, things must happen in continuations of stories where things have been said are gonna, they're waiting for this or this is gonna happen in the future, whatever. But it's so rare that we actually get an update, first of all. And then when you do get an update, a lot of the time it's, it didn't work out the way I wanted, or it didn't actually happen, or kind of fizzled out into nothing. This is unbelievable though. I mean, yeah, the initial post was great. And again, if you haven't already seen that, link down below. But this, I mean, what an update. He's paying this back for 36 years. 36 years. Phenomenal. With every single payment, you, OP, are going to be in his mind. I mean, that is just phenomenal justice. Yeah, he avoids prison, but as you said throughout this, you think it's probably better or I guess more taxing on him to go through it this way. And yeah, good gamble. It paid off. If he went to prison for 7 years, that is one thing. Terrible. But this is 36 years of pain. Just unbelievable. Right, good news is we do have time for one more story in this episode. This one actually comes from Petty Revenge. So we've gone from nuclear to pro to petty. Comment down below. Which subreddit do you prefer the most? Let's get into this story. Use my email as your spam dump? Prepare to be carpet bombed. One day, many years ago, I got an email addressed to someone who had the same first initial and last name as I do. For the purpose of this story, I'll call him G-Man. As with anyone who uses a common email address, think first initial and last name, you do sometimes get an email that isn't meant for you. It was mostly incidental things like receipts and the occasional personal email. I was chalking them up to being a data entry error. Perhaps they misheard the email address and instead of typing in gclastname@gmail.com, they typed in glastname@gmail.com. No big deal. In the cases where I could, I politely replied to the sender and let them know that I wasn't the intended recipient and to please let G-Man know that he's giving out the wrong email address going forward. It was never successful. I'd still get emails for G-Man, and it was for things that I'd think you'd want to receive, like order receipts or something that had a confirmation number attached to it. I tried to track down G-Man, but to no avail. There were multiple G-Man, last name, on social media, so I could never 100% confirm which one it might have been. And so this went on and on for years, until finally one day I got a personal email addressed to G-Man that referenced the company he worked for. Aha! Now I had something. I looked him up. It turns out that G-Man is the systems manager at said company. His LinkedIn bio says that he is an IT professional. Well, that's interesting. I found his company email and forwarded him the email, also advising him that the other address he's using is attached to another person, and it would be great if he could be more mindful of what he's typing in or giving out. Again, I was polite in my request to him. He replied and apologized, and I thought, it's finally over. But it wasn't over. Oh no, far from it. The emails I received that were addressed to G-Man actually began to increase in volume. Now I'm getting emails for mailing lists and account signups and all sorts of other rubbish. This guy, the so-called IT professional, is clearly using my email address as his spam dump, knowing that it went to an actual person. I would have to sort through dozens upon dozens of emails daily as a result of this. And as we all know, once you're on one mailing list, you tend to end up on a lot more mailing lists. By now, I've decided that clearly this clown is deliberately being a jerk, so it's gloves off and game on. I decide to extract revenge at any opportunity. It started out simple enough. If I got an account sign up, I'd click the link to verify it and then promptly log in and deactivate the account. It worked for a bit, but then there'd be another sign up. So I got more creative. I'd log into the account, change all the information, and most importantly, the password, usually to something like I am a gigantic butthole, which would leave the account active but totally inaccessible since any attempt at password recovery sent the email to my account, which was then promptly ignored and deleted. Hotel booking? I'd log on and cancel it the day before he was due to arrive. I'm guessing he never got noticed though, since it was all coming to my email. Basically anything I could do that would inconvenience G-Man, I would do it. This back and forth continued on for years. In fact, I still occasionally get emails for the guy. Then, one day, it happened. I got an email receipt for an order that G-Man had placed. It had the recipient's name and address, but more importantly, it had G-Man's address on it. Cue up, I've got a golden ticket. I finally had the means of the ultimate revenge. I took his address and signed him up for everything I could find. Free samples, i.e. adult diapers, feminine products and lube, catalogs, normal, not so normal, and then also raunchy. I spent an entire day finding anything I could enter his address into, and I dutifully filled it out. But the coup de grace, the cherry on top. When I was finding things to sign up for, I stumbled onto a website that allowed you to order free flooring samples. They'd be various sizes, but some were 12 foot by 12 foot squares. Carpet, tile, wood, linoleum, whatever. I signed G-Man up for every sample I could. Then I found another site offering the same thing, and I did it again and again, and again, until the point where I literally lost track of how many free flooring samples I signed him up for. My guess, easily in the hundreds, if not the thousands. So, I literally carpet bombed G-Man. Oh, it all makes sense now. Coincidentally, the email volume certainly decreased. I never heard from G-Man either. Maybe he deleted my initial email and forgot, or maybe he was buried under all those flooring samples. Either way, I'm sure once they started to arrive, he realized his mistake. I bet that to this day, he still gets items delivered to that address. The one thing I can't get over with this story, and it's phenomenal by the way, once again, these 3 revenges have been so good, but how stupid do you have to be to actually use someone else's email or some like spam email anyway for things that actually matter? I mean, if you're getting confirmations and you're getting emails sent to you, and going through that email address and you know the link that you get sent to your email can cancel a really important thing like a hotel booking, or you're getting confirmation statements and receipts and that sort of stuff that you need to keep a hold of. Why are you having that sent to an email that you don't have access to? That's what I don't understand. That is the dumbest part of all of this. Now, that is one thing. The revenge though is just phenomenal. And OP, I'm sorry you were caught up in this, but wow, what a way to just destroy someone's life. Imagine you come back from work and you're like, God, more tiles as you just see your front door piled with stuff. It'd be terrible. I feel like any normal person would have very quickly realized, I mean, definitely when you got this email from OP that was saying, by the way, you're using the wrong email address, please stop. To stop doing that and actually start using an email address that you'd want to use. But G-Man is G-Man, and that was some petty revenge. Today I effed up by being a jerk on the internet and causing a stranger to get divorced. I'm cross-posting this from the subreddit Today I effed up. I'm really not a mean person and I genuinely felt terrible for destroying a marriage, but the lovely users over there thought I should post here, though I didn't mean for the revenge to go to this level by any means. I don't even know if I meant for revenge at all, but here we are. So, I, a 42-year-old woman, effed up big time. 2 weeks ago, on a random Thursday morning at like 1 AM, someone started shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood. I've been having bouts of insomnia and was finally able to get to sleep, and I had to wake up at 4 AM for a meeting 2 hours away that I had to be at for 8 AM. I was fuming, and so were my dogs. I love fireworks, but I think there's a time and a place. Thursday morning at 1 AM is not it. I posted to the neighborhood Facebook group a few hours later during a coffee break about people that set off fireworks at 1 AM midweek. After I make the long drive home, I check my Facebook. Some guy comments that I can't sleep because I'm a fat pig. Now, I'm chubby, but not sloppy fat. Plus, I just lost the equivalent of a fully grown male wombat, or 54 North American grey squirrels, so I feel freaking awesome about myself. Now this is where I may have really effed up. I respond to the guy, who was maybe mid to late 30s or very early 40s, about the same age group as me. I write in a comment beneath his, "Listen, guy's name, I'm sorry I had to end things, but I just didn't have the same feelings. What you're saying now is just hurtful and mean. Please stop sending me messages and commenting on my Facebook posts. It's just a pathetic way to contact me. I told you a dozen times already. We are done. It's over." The following day, I had to get to the airport for an out-of-country vacation that had me getting up early and leaving early as heck. So I don't check my Facebook during all the craziness. Also because I'm only on it sparingly. I don't live on my phone, and when I am, I'm usually on Reddit or TikTok versus Facebook. I couldn't check my Facebook even if I wanted to. I was on a cruise, and I'm not paying $25 a day for internet, and the country we visited didn't really have the greatest Wi-Fi. Besides, I was having a blast, leaving the chaos of the world behind. I signed back in on Monday night, and frick. Apparently, people took my message seriously, and they told his wife. She was freaking out at me, pleading for information. She sent me messages. Her and his friends were DMing me. He was DMing me. It was bad. The last message was the guy saying I'm a total C-word because I refused to tell the truth, and I just destroyed his life. I immediately messaged both him and his wife explaining what happened. I sent pics of me on vacation even. Timestamps. Apparently, he is a serial cheater, and when I exposed our affair, another woman exposed her affair with the husband to the wife because she was jealous that he had yet another side chick. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, because not only are there multiple affairs, but because he humiliated her with how public this was, especially me putting this in a Facebook neighborhood group. So, there is my accidental pro-revenge. Well, there we go. What a story to kick things off. I've got to say, although it was accidental, was it justified? 100% yes, in my opinion. Like, this guy is an absolute disgrace. I'm sorry, not only because of his just online abuse. I mean, why is he calling you a fat pig on Facebook? Just ridiculous. But also because he is a serial cheater anyway. So although you probably didn't realize that when you said these things, ultimately, is it a bad thing that you kind of expose his cheating? I would say no. And if people realize that he is a cheater because of what you said, it doesn't matter if you were lying. You got to the truth. Like, realistically, this probably would have ended in divorce, this relationship, down the line at some point. It just seems pretty obvious that that was kind of a guarantee. So in doing this, in exposing this man, doesn't matter if it was accidental or not, you are saving, first of all, the woman that he is with, a lot of years probably of wasted time, and then also the person that he's having an affair with anyway a lot of time, because maybe she didn't know, maybe she did know anyway, and there's also a terrible person. It's less about her, I would say, and more about his wife, saving her a lot of years, because at least now she knows what's going on and can move on. Wow, accidentally causing a divorce. Fair play. Now moving on to our second story of revenge. Boss from hell gets what she deserves. I am a woman in my 30s, and I've been a people pleaser to a fault my whole life. I've been working in marketing for over 10 years. And over the years, I've had my fair share of bosses who were good, average, and some who sucked. There is one in particular that stood out as awful. This story is from about 5 years ago. Pamela, in her 40s, not her real name, was the VP of marketing and sales for a mid-sized retailer. She started at the company a few years after I did, and if rumors were true, she was the fourth pick for the position and was simply hired so the company could appease shareholders. I was a manager under her, and my whole job was to make sure the website and stores had their products merchandised properly, received all their monthly sales materials, managed advertising, set up and managed the department's budget, PM'd all department projects and operations, created reporting to reflect sales, managed presentations / creative briefs for future projects, etc. In short, I did her work and all the administrative grunt work to keep the department afloat. I managed all of this because I had access to her email and many times sent emails on her behalf to keep the department functioning. Pamela spent most of her time showing up after 10 AM, taking business lunches and planning company parties. I don't even know why we did those, but I planned those too. I consistently questioned why she spent so much of our budget on these events when we didn't have the budget resources for any of it. Pamela told me to take from future months' budgets to pay for the current month's overspending. So at the start of every month, I had an original budget, and by the end of the month, I had to turn in an edited budget, edited under Pamela's direction, that made it look like Pamela's spending was under control. This is important for later. I definitely made mistakes here and there, being in charge of so many tasks, and constantly found myself working 12-hour days, split between being in the office and working after my kid went to bed. Weekend work was also done before my family woke up and then after they went to bed. My word. During Pamela's first major holiday season, sales were awful. Pamela kept changing her mind on the visuals for the stores, kept bringing on new advertising and PR agencies to bring in sales. All these agencies consisted of her personal friends and ignored our buying and merchandise team's planned promotions for her own better ones. At this time, I'd been dealing with an ongoing infection that turned to sepsis and was hospitalized. The doctors and my husband said it was due to the stress of work and that I needed to take a break. As I recovered, I realized how much I was hurting myself, my family, and even the company I work for. Eventually, my old habits got to me, and I got on my phone and checked mine and my boss's emails. What I found made my blood boil. First, I got a lovely bouquet of flowers from upper management wishing me well, and I knew that Pamela organized the delivery. She sent me her favorite flowers. I went to her inbox to put the receipt in the correct folder to send to accounting when I got back, and at the top of her inbox from the past 3 days were emails clearly not related to business. What I found in her emails was Pamela emailing her personal friends, grabbing about how I can't just shake off sepsis and get back to work. She also complained that she couldn't find any of my notes, spreadsheets, or documents for any of the work she was technically in charge of. They were on our shared drive, labeled very clearly. Finally, I found an email she sent a friend from a previous company asking for advice on how to bring in sales and save her job. In this long thread, this old colleague asked if there was anyone managing most of the work, and of course, Pamela said I was. This colleague explained that clearly it was my mismanagement that was causing issues and that I could be blamed if sales didn't pull through by the end of the season. Pamela mentioned that I was in hospital and repeated comments from her other email thread. This person said that she couldn't outright fire me because it could seem like retaliation, as I needed to take emergency medical leave. But if Pamela could prove I was stealing from the company or misusing company resources, then she would have grounds to have me fired and then use me as a scapegoat. Upon my return, Pamela called me into her office and said she was worried I was taking on too much and wanted to take work off my plate. She announced that she was taking managing the department budget off my plate. She asked me to only drop off a small stack of invoices to accounting. Additionally, Pamela told me that under no circumstances was I allowed to talk to accounting about anything regarding budgets. Also, if I had any concerns about the department or workload, I wasn't allowed to go to HR. I had to discuss it directly with her. Oh, yeah, I could see where this was going. Unfortunately for Pamela, I had built a rapport with Lois, who was our main accountant. Lois always said that she would do everything in her power to help me should I ask. Knowing this, I grabbed a stack of invoices off Pamela's desk to give to accounting. I also added the email threads that I read while I was in the hospital and the current unedited budget that Pamela hadn't touched yet for the month. I also found in my filing cabinet the hard copies of old budgets with Pamela's handwriting on what numbers to change to balance our budget. Finally, I added an email from our first round of budget adjustments where Pamela subtly threatened to put someone else in my job if I couldn't do what she asked. So I walked and dropped off the invoices to accounting when I bumped into Lois. She brought up invoices, and I sternly looked at her and said Pamela is the only one in our department that Lois is allowed to talk to about our budget and invoices. Lois saw the suspiciously thick file folder on her desk, gave a firm nod, and lovingly kicked me out of her office. Within the week, Pamela was fired. From what I understand, she's been continually job hopping for the past few years. The CEO and HR brought me in to personally apologize for everything I went through and gave me a paid 1-week vacation to take at my discretion. Given other issues with this business, I left after another year. Which brings me to today. I am once again a manager for sales and marketing. I have a wonderful boss, Mike, who trusts my business decisions and backs me up on practically everything. We're hiring for my team for me to solely manage and direct. Today, I looked through the applicants and found Pamela's resume sitting among dozens of others. I stared at her name, wondering how many other people share her name. Upon review, yep, it's her. She definitely fell down the corporate ladder, with VP of our old company being the highest title she earned. And to no surprise, she embellished her achievements, claiming the work that I managed as her own, and claimed that she generated an 87% sales growth during the holiday season at our previous company. As a people pleaser who firmly believes in giving everyone a chance, it has never been so satisfying to click disqualified. One thing that I will mention that maybe a lot of you are thinking right now is, wouldn't it have been better from OP's perspective, I guess more rewarding, to have her walk into the interview room and you, OP, just be there, sat across the table, knowing full well this is the same Pamela, and just seeing her reaction, knowing in that one moment that she is never ever going to get that job and is completely wasting her time. However, I will put up on screen right now what OP replied to that. To those suggesting that I interview her to see her reaction, I would have loved to see her face as she walked in, but I felt it would have risked my boss's trust in my decision-making ability. I understand that. I do understand that because, yeah, you don't want to kind of sacrifice or risk your own job while messing with Pamela, as much as I'm sure you want to. However, couldn't you have just done the interview anyway and then just secretly said, no, I don't really like her? Although again, yeah, thinking about it, you do risk Pamela saying, I know you, it could potentially put your job in jeopardy. One last thing that OP did say though is, maybe I'll send a personally written rejection email. That you definitely have to do. It's without a doubt. You just have to do it. Get it done. Stepdad cheats on my mum, so we get revenge. I moved in with my mum after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative jerk, but that's another story. Shortly after the divorce, my mum introduced me to her boyfriend at the time, Chris. Now, my mum worked as a corrections officer at the county jail. The boyfriend was a former inmate, in for a DUI. That should have been the first red flag, but my mum was grieving a long marriage, and I didn't want to push the subject. Chris seemed to make her happy, and that was enough for me. Me, my bro, and my sis all moved in with my mum and Chris, and we seemed to get along okay. Chris and I bonded a bit over our love of video games, and all seemed well. That is until 2017. Due to Chris's prior DUI, he had to go in regularly for probationary checkups at the courthouse. One day, he didn't return, and we all got a little worried. We then received a phone call from him from Texas. Turns out, when he arrived at the courthouse that day, he was jumped by the FBI. His family from Texas was implicated on a number of gang and drug-related crimes, and due to a situation where he was in a vehicle during a drug handoff, he was on the hook as well. He ended up agreeing to testify against his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence, and he was allowed to be out of prison before the trial. Soon after, the drinking started. Now, obviously because of his DUI, Chris was clearly no stranger to drinking. He began to drink more and more, to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer a day. Chris was a mean drunk. He regularly started fights when wasted, and while they never got physical, he wasn't exactly kind with his words. My mum enabled his behaviour for several years, saying the stress was getting to him from work and from the upcoming trial. Finally, after several years, my mum had had enough. Chris came home extremely drunk one night, and my mum confronted him. She asked if he'd been drinking, and when he didn't deny it, she kicked him out. He went to live with a friend temporarily. The next morning, Mum asked us to help gather a few of his essentials so that he didn't have to re-enter the home until he was sober. While we were gathering his things, we heard a knock at the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's co-workers and someone I went to high school with. She told my mum she had something important to share. After sitting my mum down and telling her not to share where she got the info from, Betty told my mum about how Chris was cheating on my mum with Darla. How he regularly had Darla perform sexual acts in and around his workplace. How Betty had caught them, and how Chris told her that if she ever told my mum, he'd fire her. He was the store manager. And finally, how Darla was pregnant. My mum was angry. After the initial shock wore off, she told us to round up all of Chris's things and to dump them outside. We took everything of his out of the house and tossed it all in the alley behind our house. Chris had no reason or ability to return to the house. It was rented with only my mum on the paperwork, so no issues there. In the meantime, she called and confronted him. He confessed to the entire affair and that he was happy Darla was pregnant because that meant he'd finally have a child of his own. Mum refused to have more kids. We three were massive strains on her body. She likely wouldn't survive anymore. He refused to apologize for any of his actions. My mum arranged for him to collect his items from the alley with an officer present, and he left our lives. So now for the moment we've all been waiting for. The revenge. Now, my mum clearly wanted to dust her hands of him and move on. She was already quite emotional from the whole ordeal and wanted nothing more from him. But my sister, brother, and I had other ideas. First, we called his workplace. DQ operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owns several branches in the area. He was also a good friend. We informed him of the sexual acts being performed on the premises, and he went through the processes of getting Chris booted from his position and barred him from any of the branches in the area. Funnily, Betty got his position after he left, and now runs a tight and clean ship. Chris no longer had a job or a place to live, and so went to live with Darla in a town about an hour away. We found out that he started working at another DQ in that town and informed the owner of that location of the situation. It took significantly longer due to there being no current indecent actions occurring there, but eventually he lost that job too. Soon after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mum and our family, probably because of his job loss. Now, due to the whole situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for his DUI, and thus still did not have a license. He never had to drive when he lived with us, since work was local and we could drive him as needed, but here he was, clearly driving around by himself when he shouldn't be. We contacted the police and informed them about Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood and that we believed Chris was driving it without a license. We told them to pull over the vehicle next time they see it, as it would likely be Chris driving again. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we were told that Chris indeed was pulled over and sent back to the local jail for driving without a license and while intoxicated. The police also did a search of the home he was staying at and found several guns at the premises. Since he was a felon, he was not legally allowed to have weaponry on the premises, meaning there was more jail time tacked on. By the time his jail time had finished, it was just in time for him to be sent back to incarceration in Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while Chris was in prison. Darla evidently realized what an absolute butt Chris was and cut ties with him while he was in prison. During his prison time, Chris started sending tons of letters to my mum, stating how sorry he was, pleading to take him back, and ranting about how it wasn't his fault. This was all in the same letter, mind you. Mum burnt every one of them. We moved on, moving out of states. Chris evidently got out of prison some years ago and now lives in Kansas, struggling and fighting child support, which Darla sued him for. Mum now has a new boyfriend who treats her right and cares a lot more than Chris ever did. My brother and sister moved on and out, and I still live with Mum, assisting her with the newly purchased home that we've been renovating. Life's looking okay. I was reminded of this story by a chat with a co-worker about cheaters, and I thought to post it here for others to enjoy. Well, to be honest with you guys, the first thing that kind of springs to mind, or the first reaction I have after finishing that story is, wow, Chris was driving around your neighborhood in Darla's car under the influence and with a gun probably as well. That is extremely scary, and I'm kind of, well, I don't know. I kind of want to say that it's lucky that you guys weren't affected or harmed, or that he didn't find you first. I don't know what else he could have been doing that other than trying to look for you and get his own revenge. That sounds terrifying. So look, great revenge and all, but genuinely, I think that could have gone so much worse. Wow. Like, look, I'm all for good revenge stories, but by tracking him down and getting him fired again, which, yeah, I can't argue, is great revenge in isolation, that made him come back to the neighborhood and look for you guys, right? You know, and we know what he's like, as I've just said, driving under the influence with a weapon. So yeah, like, good revenge, but also there could have been a really, really tragic ending. So I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. Maybe that revenge went too far. Obviously, in the end, it was fine and it was good revenge, but think of the potential consequences. What do you guys think about that? Sometimes does revenge go too far? Would it have been fine just, you know, making him lose his job in the neighborhood you're in, and by the time he's in Kansas and stuff, just leave him to it? That's enough. Because again, you don't want to damage someone to such an extent that they then have nothing to lose anymore, because I think that's what has kind of happened here. Let me know in the comments down below. That is it's a controversial one, but yeah, I reckon that might have been a bit too far just for your own safety. When your racket with the local cops bites you in the butt internationally. This happened a few years ago when I was serving overseas with the US military. The location I was at was in a poorer area. There's a fair number of panhandlers, a lot of petty crime, and just people doing stupid stuff. Well, one racket that goes on in this area, and apparently in other areas of the country too, is the local cops incentivize reporting vehicles without a date inspection sticker. Apparently, they give these people access to the inspection database if they think the sticker is fake or stolen, which actually does happen. If you drive a motorcycle, one of the things they tell you when you're in process is to keep the sticker in your wallet and not on the vehicle, or else it'll just get peeled off. Anyway, what these people will do if they find a car with an out-of-date sticker, or if they run the plates and find it's out of date, they'll jimmy the door open, steal every single thing out of the car, and leave a note that they've taken it to the police station. The idea is that you show up at the police station to get your stuff, and they force you to pay the fine for an overdue sticker, and then give you a deadline for an inspection, or else you'll get another fine. Well, I came out to my car one morning, and lo and behold, there was a note on my seat saying that all my stuff was at the local police station because my inspection sticker was fake and I had to go and get it. Now, not only am I late for work, my kid's also going to be late for school because there's no bus and I have to drive her every morning on my way. Also, my inspection sticker is not out of date, so I've got no idea what's going on. Now here's the thing that was extremely problematic. I put my passport and my wife and kids in the glove box because I was taking them to the base to get some paperwork done. I was also going to grab some paperwork for my wife to apply for a new passport because hers had expired. I'm very forgetful, so I put them in the night before and made sure the car was locked. Yeah, dumb mistake. Anyway, I get to the station, ask them what the heck is going on, and then when I have them look at the inspection documents that the guy had taken, which clearly stated the car had been inspected and was current, they apologized and told me they'd give me my things back and I had to wait there for a second. I asked to file a police report for theft, but they looked at me like I had 3 heads and told me nothing was stolen, even though somebody broke into my car and took my things. This is when a light bulb went off in my head, and this might fall into the unethical category. The guy had taken official US passports, which might be a problem, but probably nothing would come of it since they were turned right into the police. However, I asked him where my wife's passport was. They told me that whatever is there is there. I said I needed a police report because I needed to contact the US Embassy about a stolen passport and the fact that this police station would know exactly who the person was that stole it because they had dropped off my things that morning. I've never seen someone's attitude change as quickly as that cop's attitude changed. He tried to talk me out of filing a police report, but I was pretty insistent, so I went ahead with the report and then I did contact the embassy and reported the passport stolen and gave them all the information of the police station. And when I got the police report, I emailed it to them as well. I wound up getting a free passport out of it for my trouble. The embassy told me they were going to handle it, and from what I heard, the person who broke into my car actually got arrested and fined, and was looking at additional charges because he stole foreign documents. I really would have liked to be a fly on the wall when one of the local cops rolled into wherever he was and told him to come with them. I don't feel bad at all. Hopefully the dude learned his lesson and I didn't have any further issues until I went back home. Okay guys, look, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't really understand what's just happened there. It's not often that this happens, I'll be honest, because a lot of these stories are pretty self-explanatory and the revenge is, you know, it's kind of makes sense or it's obvious. I don't get it. Why is the fact that, I don't know, maybe I'm just barking up the wrong tree, but from my point of view, something is awry or something is unethical because OP's wife's passport has already expired. I just don't get it, right? I don't understand. So what happens is they take all the stuff, hand it to the police, then you go to the police to get it back, and then they say, actually, you need a date of inspection or whatever on your car, pay for that now, so you get a fine. You know, obviously a bit backwards, but yeah, that's I guess some sort of racketeering with the local cops. However, what is it about OP asking where his wife's passport was that made this into some form of revenge? What's the difference, I guess I'm trying to say, between his passport and their child's passport being taken and his wife's expired passport being taken? Surely taking any passport at all is illegal, or handing a passport in, unless he's saying or claiming that his wife's passport wasn't expired. Pretty much, guys, get in the comments down below. I don't really know. I think I'm missing something here. I've looked through the comments and no one has even mentioned it, so I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, maybe you let me know in the comments. I'll have another think, but that's my initial reaction. I don't know what's happened. Look, I get the fact that these are US passports, and maybe that is the thing that's illegal here. However, I don't understand why OP has specifically referenced his wife's passport. It's got to be to do with the fact that it's expired in some regard, or I don't know. I'm missing something perhaps, or something's missing from the story. But again, guys, comment down below because yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but an interesting one nonetheless. Deliberately deplete my prepaid phone balance. You will pay for it 1,000 times over. I went to middle school in the early 2010s, right before smartphones really took off. I got my first phone right before starting 6th grade. It was a slide phone with a pay-as-you-go plan that cost 10 cents per minute for calls and per text message sent or received. Worse yet, sending or receiving photos cost 25 cents each. It was very expensive, and my parents only gave me $100 a year for this. If I exceeded that amount, I had to cover the rest with my limited birthday and Christmas money that I had. Fortunately, most of my friends were good about helping me preserve the balance. They would call and I'd let the call drop, but immediately call back on a landline so it wouldn't count as a call, and they'd email me or message me on Skype for most things. Everything was good until Derek joined the group in 7th grade. At first, we thought he was funny, but but we quickly got fed up with him as he was very unpleasant and exhibited many antisocial behaviors. He started drama within the friend group and also caused issues between us and other kids outside of the group. He was manipulative and always played the victim when others rightfully called him out on his trash, and he knew how to charm parents, so getting rid of him was easier said than done. He was the one friend who didn't respect my phone situation. He very frequently texted me dumb memes, even though I told him multiple times to just email or Skype them to me instead, since picture text messages cost 25 cents each for me. Unfortunately, blocking phone numbers was a feature that was unavailable for this pay-as-you-go plan, so there was nothing that I could do as he spammed my phone. One day he got mad at me for some reason and spammed my phone with memes. He must have sent me over 100 lolcats over text. He kept sending them until I lost service since my phone balance was depleted. I'd lost the $40 remaining in my account as a result. I was extremely angry and demanded that he pay me the $40 he had cost me, and he refused and said it wasn't his problem. I got home from school really upset and told my dad about the situation, expecting him to go and tear Derek's mother a new one and demand the money. But my dad said that it wasn't worth the battle. I even asked him about a small claims court, but he said that not all battles are worth fighting and that the effort wasn't worth $40. He took me to the carrier's store and loaded $50 onto the phone. The carrier changed my phone number and they managed to block Derek's number. They'd initially said that blocking phone numbers wasn't possible with this plan, but my dad insisted and would not leave the store until they did it. I was extremely paranoid about my phone number being leaked and other kids spamming it to screw with me. Fortunately, my parents got iPhones that summer and got me one too, and the new family plan had an unlimited text plan. Nonetheless, I was still angry at the $40 he essentially stole from me out of malice. Fortunately, not too long after, there was a big blowout between Derek and the rest of the friend group at the end of the school year, and we permanently kicked him out of the group. He was an outcast the following year in 8th grade. Nobody was tolerating his trash anymore, and he changed schools the year after, and we never heard from him again. Fast forward to a few years ago. I was back home for a few months between graduating college and starting a new job on the other side of the country. I went out to some garage sales one Saturday morning, and I ended up at Derek's house. I recognized his mother, but I don't think she recognized me. I guess glasses and a beard is all you need. I noticed some Pokemon napkins out for sale, and when I picked them up to look at them, Derek's mum said that her son had been obsessed with Pokemon for his whole life and that she was tired of Pokemon stuff occupying her home for so many years. I said that these napkins were for my younger cousin who was really into Pokemon, and I asked if she had any more Pokemon stuff. She said she didn't know that people were still into that and that there were a few boxes in the attic with her son's old stuff. She actually took me inside the house, which I never imagined I'd set foot inside ever again, and let me climb up the attic ladder and take down several large boxes to look through. The first one had Christmas ornaments in it and other junk, but I freaked out inside when she opened a box jam-packed with Pokemon video games in the original boxes, though I kept my cool on the outside. The whole reason I had agreed to go inside in the first place was because I was holding out hope of this exact scenario happening. See, I knew Derek was obsessed with Pokemon. Our friend group liked Pokemon back in the day, even when other kids thought it wasn't cool. But Derek was on a whole different level. He bragged about his collection all the time. At the time, he had every single main series game in the original box and in mint condition, as he always had to add in. I went to his house once and he was showing me his collection. He yelled at me for touching one of the games. Nobody was allowed to do that except him. He had many older Nintendo games in excellent condition, but Pokemon was his favorite. He had had a couple of incidents with his mum damaging or throwing away his things, not out of malice, but just ignorance, as she didn't think the games or collectibles had any value. Fast forward into the present day, I was thinking about this when I asked his mother if she had any other Pokemon stuff, so she ended up bringing out the mother load. We opened all of the boxes that she had me bring down. Within the boxes, there was the beloved collection of Pokemon games, all very well preserved, as well as several Nintendo consoles, hundreds of games, 24 binders full of Pokemon cards, and there was also a box of many Lego sets with the original boxes and everything, with many old Star Wars sets. When I saw Jango Fett, I knew I struck gold. I told her that I liked old Legos as well, and I asked her how much for the 5 boxes of games, cards, and Lego sets. And she thought for a second and said, $100 a box or $400 for all 5? I told her I'd take it all, and I hauled ass to get to an ATM. I loaded the 5 boxes into my dad's truck and immediately drove home. I knew there was potentially tens of thousands of dollars of goods here. This was the score of a lifetime, and I finally felt vindicated for the $40 that Derek had taken from me all those years ago. I ended up giving all the stuff to my uncle, who is a hobbyist eBay reseller. He offered to sell it all. He was willing to go through the effort and sell everything individually. And despite my insistence, he said that he wouldn't take more than a 10% cut of the profits after all fees and taxes. We went through and logged every single item along with the estimated value, and the total of the whole lot was about $40,000. Oh my goodness me. 40,000 was a poetic number, since this was 1,000 times the value of what Derek stole from me all those years ago. Wow. Now the title actually makes literal sense. Deliberately deplete my prepaid phone balance, you will pay for it 1,000 times over. Literally. Oh, that is so good. My uncle sold most of the lot before the end of the summer and ended up writing me a check, though it was considerably less than $40,000, but it was still a life-changing amount of money for me. I was able to pay off my remaining student loans and put the rest towards a down payment on a new car. That is an unbelievable story. Now that is a glorious, glorious story of revenge. As I said at the end there, I was not expecting the title to be so literal. That is phenomenal. I've got to say, first of all, that initial plan that you're on with your phone is an absolute disgrace. Secondly, Derek is a disgrace for abusing that plan, knowing full well it was costing you that much. I mean, back in the day, some of you are probably too young to remember this now, but the oldies among you, the more mature, I guess. I'd include myself in this. Back in the day, you know, we used to have absolutely disgraceful phone contracts. I remember, like, you'd text another country and it would cost you like 50p for me in the UK per text. I remember one time I was texting someone in Switzerland, had no idea about this. Then my dad had the bill and just said, Jack, why do I have this unbelievably large charge on your latest phone bill? Who have you been texting? And I was like, yeah, I did not realize that. But at least that time it was my own fault, or I guess my own lack of knowing. Whereas this time, someone knowing that you're going to have to pay a lot of money for their actions, that is very, very poor. And it makes this justice and this revenge so, so sweet. Great stuff. Obviously, his mum is none the wiser about the true value of Pokemon and cards and everything related to the game these days, especially in original condition and in good nick. But wow, $40,000 or even anything close to that. That is insane. Love it. How a PE teacher put my sister in the hospital. So this is about my older sister, who I'll be calling Jane for this post. Now, Jane has asthma. She's had it ever since she was a baby and gets it pretty badly. We've had to spend more than one Christmas in the hospital because she had pneumonia, and the school was very well aware that she has asthma. She always had an inhaler on her, and the front office had a nebulizer for emergencies. And there were multiple doctor notes on file limiting what she could do. She couldn't play a wind instrument in band class. She was allowed to not sing in choir if she was having trouble, and if teachers ever took students outside while the weather was bad, she was allowed to opt out. She was in middle school when this happened, and all of the teachers got the memo except for the PE teacher. Not only did this female dog not believe that Jane had asthma, but she also didn't believe that asthma was real. She thought it was just something that kids come up with so they don't have to exercise. What? All right, I've got to interject here, guys. Now, I would typically say that I cannot believe this, right? This seems unbelievable that a PE teacher, a qualified PE teacher, thinks that asthma isn't real. But maybe there genuinely are PE teachers out there that just like love fitness and exercise so much to the extent that they think that any kid that says they have asthma is actually just making it up. So I guess I'm not saying that this woman necessarily thinks that asthma doesn't exist or hasn't been trained to know what asthma is, but maybe she just thinks it's an excuse that kids always use. Okay, let's get back to the story. This caused a few problems, and Jade had been sent to the principal's office more than once for trying to opt out of gym class. She wouldn't get in trouble, but being reprimanded in front of the entire class and getting sent to the office is mortifying for a middle schooler, and she was sick of it. Our story takes place in the middle of winter, just before winter break. We live in a cold climate, and our winters get wet and cold, neither of which are great for asthmatic lungs. On this day, the teacher had them running the mile, but instead of having them run laps in the gym, she insisted they go outside, and kids would get in trouble for taking their coats because they had to be in uniform. Jane tells the teacher she can't run outside in this weather, and the teacher tells her that if she refuses to run, then she'll be sent to the office. Now, if you remember, middle schoolers' sense of self-preservation is non-existent, and Jane has balls so big that they impair her walking, so she decided enough was enough. This school had a track that was a quarter-mile long, but for whatever reason, the teachers never had kids run the mile on it. Instead, they had the kids run around the block that the school was on twice, while the teacher stood at the starting point with a stopwatch. What Jane knew, and the teacher didn't, was that at the same time Jane had gym class, our mum would go to kindergarten to pick up our younger sister. She'd seen Jane running the mile on nice days earlier in the year, and gave her a little honk and a wave. So imagine, if you will, my mother, a CNA, going to pick up her baby, only to spot her eldest daughter running around outside with no coat on in the middle of winter, struggling not to slip on ice in certain spots. Mum was annoyed. She pulled up next to Jane to ask what the heck she was doing, and Jane told her through chattering teeth that the teacher was forcing her to run the mile outside with the other girls. Mum told Jane to get into the car and drove around to the front entrance to rush her into the office, demanding they call an ambulance and get her a nebulizer for a breathing treatment and something to warm her up and get her circulation back, as she was literally turning blue. Jane was hospitalized. The school had to pay for the ambulance ride, pay for the nebulizer medication, and pay for the hospital stay. Mum chewed out the principal and the teacher, then the doctor did the same. The teacher was suspended and put under review, but for whatever reason, she didn't get fired. However, she did learn not to ignore doctor's notes in kids' files, and there wasn't another incident like that in the 12 years it took for all of our siblings to finish middle school. And Jane continues to have the largest balls I've ever seen. Why is it always PE teachers, guys? That's my question. You just hear about them a lot. Everyone's had one bad PE teacher who just forces kids to do things that they don't want to do, just for no real reason. And I feel like I've seen at least 2 or 3 stories like this, or similar to this, over the years. Now, yes, not necessarily have they had this level of revenge, which was excellent to see. But, you know, on like Entitled Parents or Entitled People, you hear about teachers like this, PE teachers to be precise. It's pretty crazy that she wasn't fired, by the way. Like you've said at the end there that she did learn not to ignore doctor's notes in kids' files. Is that not the #1 thing to like do as any teacher, is read those files and know exactly what is in them? Surely. Like, yes, the point is to educate, but first and foremost, it's to keep the child alive, isn't it? Like, when they're in your company, you are their carer. That's insane. But yeah, shout out Jane for saying, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm just not doing this again. And shout out to your mum as well. You've lost weight. You look great. Slight backstory. About 7 years ago, I was forcibly moved out by my father. And after my mother tried to guilt trip me into dropping the associated court case, we went no contact for a while. She and I are on good terms now, but it took a while for us to get comfortable meeting up again. And this interaction occurred during our first meetup after that point. Because of how much this had affected my life, I'd been between jobs for a while and was severely struggling with the poverty of very abruptly having to fend for myself on top of the mental issues caused by the incident. Suffice to say, I was really struggling to have regular meals and was definitely not at 100%. It had been close to a year since she'd last seen me, and due to this intense poverty, I'd naturally lost close to 30 kilograms, 66 pounds since then. I was slightly overweight before and was now just slightly underweight. Don't worry, I wasn't skin and bones. My mum was trying to be friendly, and I'm sure she did sincerely mean it as a compliment when she said, "You've lost weight, you look great," as she's also struggled with her weight a bit. However, I was still quite bitter and uncomfortable with seeing her again after the stance she took, and it wasn't exactly intentional weight loss. So I looked her in the eyes and said, "Thank you. It's from the malnutrition since I can't afford to eat properly." Guys, she went frickin' silent. I don't think she looked me in the eye for the rest of the meetup. I would never be so bluntly rude to her now since we're on good terms, but she really needed the reminder of how bad my life had become because of the incident. At least she bought me a F ton of groceries afterwards because of it, so I had some proper food again for a while. Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, I guess, but she can't just like buy some groceries for you in the short term and that makes up for everything that's happened in the long term. I don't know what the incident was. Obviously, we don't know what forcibly moved out by your father means, but yeah, depending on the age this was or what happened, I mean, who knows if it's legal or not, but yeah, losing close to 30 kilograms by not being able to get, you know, the sufficient food that you need, whether that's the quantity or quality, whatever, or other stuff, you know, from the emotional abuse perhaps of what happened. 30 kilograms is nuts, given you were slightly overweight before. Wow. Like, it's not as if you were, 200 kg and lost 30 and you're still overweight. Yeah, mental. But I'm glad that she now probably realizes what has happened to you, but then surely she should have realized that anyway. Shouting, "I'm 15, you pedo," at every guy who harasses me on behalf of younger me. I just found this sub and wow, I love it. I thought I'd share something I've been doing for a few years, which I think this sub will appreciate. I used to get harassed as a young teen, a heck of a lot, because I dressed alt, and therefore men think you're not a person, but a walking goth sex doll. I also worked in the biggest alt market in my city, and we would get so many guys in there just to harass young girls or try to manipulate them. I would try to be a cool aunt figure to these girls and guide them, showing them self-defense, etc. But honestly, the problem seemed to be getting worse and worse. One day, after I'd had to deal with a 14-year-old crying on me because a stranger said he was gonna finish in her hair, I was walking home from work and some guy started shouting the exact same thing at me. Now, I'm pretty lucky in that I don't look much older than I did at 14 or 15. People already said I looked 18. And in that moment, I had a wonderful idea. I turned around and screamed, "I'm 15, you freaking pedo." The friend I was with got the memo and joined in screaming pedo at them. At that point, we'd been walking through the busiest square in the city. Pretty soon other people started paying attention to what we were screaming and joined in till there must have been 20 plus people shouting at the guy with easily 200 others staring. I've never seen someone poop it so quick. It was absolutely hilarious to see him go from feeling so big and powerful to so scared so quickly. He legged it off and dived into a taxi, clearly scared that if he stayed, an angry mob would form around him. It was brilliant. I still do it to this day when I get harassed, if there's enough people around for it to work, and some of my friends have joined in too. Hopefully before too long, the message will spread around them and they'll all become too scared to harass anyone. Well, you know what, OP? I actually think you're doing the right thing here. Yes, obviously they're not pedos because you're over the age of 18, but they don't know how old you are. So yeah, they're running away because they have no idea, and for all they know, you could be under the age of 18. And what if you were under the age of 18 but didn't say anything? It'd be terrible. So yeah, again, kind of like the first story, you've stopped this person from doing this again in the future. So yes, although you're telling a white lie, it's for the good of humanity. Have you ever sucked a D? There was a guy in my small animal care class back in high school who would always ask questions about my asexuality in a condescending tone. You know the ones. How do you know you're asexual if you've never had sex? Are you sure you just haven't met the one yet? How can you be dating, insert my partner's name here, without sex? So you're just fine with being a virgin forever? Almost every day while I sat with our class chickens, I was interviewed on what I do with my parts. His favourite of the questions was, how can you be so sure you're asexual if you haven't had sex? I tried to explain to him multiple times that I didn't need to have sex to know that I was asexual, that it's a thing you feel, or in our case, don't feel, like how someone would know how they felt about being with men versus women, or anyone in between. I used all the analogies I could think of, and he just wouldn't stop. One day, I had enough. Without thinking, I yelled, "Have you ever sucked a D, Mike?" I've never seen any person so shocked, like he'd just been told something that would forever change his trajectory of life. What? Have you ever had homosexual intercourse with a male? No. Well then how can you be sure you're straight then? Huh, Mike? Stammering, he repeatedly insisted it was because he felt such a strong attraction to ladies that there was no possible way he could be gay. Every single time though, I asked him again how he was so sure. Struggling not to laugh, my friend was trying to get me to lower my voice. Look, Mike, now the chickens are scared. You made me scare the chickens. Get back to me when you've sucked a D, Michael. Naturally, I got in trouble, but my teacher was chill and it was nothing more than a good scolding and a 2-week ban from sitting with the chickens. I honestly think I should have gotten in more trouble. I should have controlled my temper. Well, there's no going back in time, I guess. For the remaining 2 months that we shared class together, he never asked me how I could be so confidently asexual. Maybe he learned something that day. Maybe he was scared of incurring my wrath once again. We may never know. I still haven't gotten any word that he sucked a D yet though. Alright, and here is some chicken tax up on screen right now. I don't think I've ever seen chicken tax before on Reddit, but I will say the chickens look pretty lovely. Especially like the white one. Is that racist? It wasn't meant to be, and it obviously isn't. But I just think the white one looks cute. Not that the black one doesn't. Could this stay in? Yes, because it's not racist. It's just unfortunate that I've said that. There we go, guys. I hope you don't take offense to that. It's just a joke. Well, it's not a joke. I mean it. I thought the white one looks cool. Anyway, yeah, let's just move on. And now for our final traumatized them backstory. Tell the entire class about my depression while I'm in the mental hospital. Hope you don't mind me emailing the entire staff about your AA meetings. I have severe clinical depression and I've been struggling with it for years. The teachers are always made aware of my hospital admissions so they can be more lenient on late work after I get back, which I've never really had a problem with. Now, there was this maths teacher I had, let's call her Mrs. R. My dad is a recovering alcoholic and goes to AA regularly, which I'm very proud of him for. When he went to a parent-teacher conference with her for the first time, he told me in the car that he remembered her from AA and was surprised she got a job since she relapsed constantly. Now, I didn't care much about it since everyone has their problems and just decided to forget about him saying it. Now, I had to be hospitalized due to an unalive attempt. It was for about 3 weeks, and during that time, I was doing math work to keep up with her class. When I came back, I realized that everyone acted very off when they talked to me. I was fairly confused, so I asked one of my friends what happened when I was gone. Apparently, a kid had openly asked why I was gone for most of the year, without any repercussions, and Mrs. R decided it was appropriate to go on a rant about how I was depressed and mentally ill, and that she hated how I was coddled by the school board. She also stated that if I was her child, she would beat the depression out of me. I was royally annoyed at the fact that she did that and thought it was a good thing to do to a kid that at that point was in middle school and was being bullied left and right. In a rage, I sent a mass email to the staff, stating that she was seen in AA and how uncomfortable I felt with an alcoholic teaching me stuff. Following this, she was terminated because not even the administration knew about her addiction and thought that it wasn't safe for her to be around children. Now, just want to make sure, OP, that you saying following this she was terminated, does that mean she was shot and killed? I hope it does. I fear it doesn't, but yeah, I feel like that is the only reasonable outcome here, is that she was shot on sight. Because the things that she's doing here are a disgrace, and yeah, it is kind of weird that her school wouldn't know about her alcoholism and her alcoholic past, but maybe she just hid it. I mean, that's, I'm sure, what happened, which is crazy to be an alcoholic that isn't recovered and is still, well, relapsing constantly, according to your dad. But yeah, having that person around children is crazy. Yeah, you did the right thing once again. To be honest, it doesn't really matter that she is an alcoholic or goes to AA meetings or relapses, whatever. Like, the fact that she's disclosing this to her class, your classmates, and then saying all this stuff that she said, like, it is absolutely ridiculous. She hated how you were coddled by the school board, and that if you were her child, she would beat the depression out of you. That's absolutely insane. For that reason alone, she should obviously not be in education. Threaten my friend with revenge prawn, I'll ruin your whole dang life. My very good friend made some slightly dumb mistakes and sent some pictures to someone that she reasonably thought she could trust, but not knowing much more than his first name, his screen name, and roughly where he lived and the type of work he did. He is not in our country, but had indicated that he would be traveling for work to near us shortly, and they'd made some plans to meet. And when she got some red flags and backed out, the dude threatened to publish these pictures online. I am, incidentally, an attorney. So, some searching later and gathering up any pictures he sent her of him that could possibly identify him, his online handle led me to a TikTok page, which led me to an Instagram page with his name on it. That led to a LinkedIn page with his place of work that matched a picture he sent with a branded polo he was wearing. Some more searches got me the email of the CEO, the VP of HR, operations manager, and the public relations manager. I just fired off an email on behalf of my client of the screenshots of him threatening revenge prawn, snippets of the conversation showing that username while he sent that exact picture of him wearing his company's branded apparel, links to how I know it's him, along with pictures he's sent her of his motorcycle with the license plate showing, as further proof that it is him. I also included screenshots of him discussing a workplace incident that were timestamped, along with pieces of dialogue discussing how he had sex with an ex at his place of work and discussing plans to have sex with her in his office as well. I also included a picture he sent her showing his work laptop with his entire Outlook calendar, along with proprietary information, which he sent to prove he was busy, along with other pictures he took of his workplace with non-consenting employees. I further informed his employer that I will be forwarding all this information to law enforcement. And since he'd indicated that he'd be traveling to the US soon, we'll also forward this to the local office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As, since my client is a US citizen on US soil, these threats constituted a federal crime, so that should they continue with his employment and continue with their plans to send him to the United States for work, I will ensure, on behalf of my client, that federal law enforcement is waiting for him on arrival. Which I will do, as one of the assistant US attorneys for this region is a law school buddy of mine. Since I have his license plate, I know where he lives and will be contacting his local authorities tomorrow. You dumb mother effer, thinking you were hiding around anonymity, thinking you could threaten my friend? It took me 45 minutes to destroy your life. Okay, so I'm recording this on the 5th of April, 2024. What I've just read there was posted on the 4th of April in the morning, and there is an update to come, phenomenally, which was posted literally just a few hours ago at the time of recording this. Now, before we get into that, I just want to give my initial thoughts. Yeah, I mean, what else can you say really other than, F around and find out? If you're going to try something like this and you're not clever and you're leaving clues and hints as to who you really are, in the modern day with technology, it's really not that hard to do a little bit of digging. I mean, yes, you've got unlucky, I guess unlucky in air quotes here, that the person that you're doing this to has a friend who's a good lawyer. But I mean, anyone could do this. It's not that hard. If you're leaving clues like this, it's so easy to find who you are, where you live, who you work for, etc., etc. And you've just ruined your entire life. What for? For threatening something stupid like this? Really? Was it worth it? Obviously not. I mean, you deserve it. Absolutely, but you're just so dumb. Then again, he's probably not expecting this sort of level. I would love to see his face as he realizes this unravels. I mean, we're going to get into the update right now to see what happens next, but my word, imagine this. You send off a threat online, think nothing of it, think, oh, I'm so clever and anonymous here and I'm going to get what I want. And then the following happens. Let's get into the update. Okay, now let's get into the update of that one, posted just 22 hours ago at the time of recording. Like I said in the intro, this is a very fresh story. So, barely 12 hours later, this happened. Before I get into the update though, I want to clarify a few things from my original post, primarily about the contact of the employer and why. Some questioned its truthfulness. While the entire story is true, some details were omitted for various reasons. There was more she and I had in our possession that did positively identify this individual. So, would a lawyer contact his employer like some stated would not be done? Well, it depends. I did not do what I did on behalf of a client who retained me. I did it as a friend to help a friend. And as her friend, who was also a labour and employment law attorney, I knew exactly how to squeeze this. And here is the thing. I was absolutely aware from the onset that the revenge prom threat would go nowhere with his employer, even if I could clearly lay out how the person with this screen name was in fact this person who works at that company. All we had were screenshots. If it was just the revenge prom threat, any employer would go, well, thank you for bringing it to our attention, but even if we accept our employee uses this screen name and we neither confirm nor deny anyone of that name works here, we have no provenance on this. This is just an alleged screenshot of an alleged conversation that could be easily edited and manipulated. Please feel free to pursue this with local authorities, and rest assured, should we be asked to, we will cooperate fully with any law enforcement inquiry, but we have no further comment at this time. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. These days, it's so easy to edit absolutely anything, and I guess that's why a company couldn't really use it. And I know that's what they would say, because that's exactly what I would say. An alleged screenshot of an alleged conversation that was allegedly sent under an alleged username that's allegedly one of our employees. Whatever, dude. Call the cops if you're worried about it. We'll answer them honestly if they come to us. So no, the issue wasn't the revenge prom threat. It was the picture of the contents of the work laptop, because that can't be faked. There's no way of her or me to create a false image of the actual proprietary information on his work computer unless he sent it. There is no way for me or her to have possession of images taken of his co-workers without their consent unless he sent them. The proof here wasn't that this person broke the law, it's that he sent pictures of company employees and property which would absolutely be verifiable by their IT department that yes, this absolutely is his laptop. That's what would get him fired. So I advised my friend not to block him, to sit back and wait and not respond to anything, but let him dig himself deeper. And respond he did. Oh, and one more update, he's been fired. So with now definitive proof that the individual in the online conversation is in fact this person, we'll forward it all to the local authorities in his country, along with his license plate number. They are more than capable of getting his home address. Well, OP, fair play to you. It's one thing me saying at the end of the first post, you know, it's easy to do this now, to track people down online. It's another thing doing it legally and making sure you know exactly what you're doing and then carrying out what you want to happen so well to, as you say, yeah, completely destroy this guy's life very fairly and very justly in just, what, 45 minutes? I don't really get why people need an extra explanation. I think you explained it perfectly at the start, OP. There are a few weird comments down below. Apparently people were confused. I wasn't confused. I think you explained it perfectly well. And yeah, it was just really well executed from start to finish. Definitely the most professional nuclear revenge that I've seen. Normally we get some crazy stuff that is either bordering on illegal or is just very illegal. This was nuclear because it's absolutely destroyed someone's life, but it was so professionally and expertly done, it doesn't even feel nuclear. It just feels right. Okay, now let's move on to our next story of nuclear revenge. How about this for a title? Didn't really want to post on this account, but it's the only one that met the karma requirements. Not too much given away there. Let's go. Okay, bear with me. I'm dyslexic and struggle with writing. Me and my girlfriend moved up to a remote little town a year ago. It's so peaceful and amazing. Best decision of our lives. We were looking at places to buy and we came across a house that was pretty bad. The foundation was collapsing, the roof was collapsing, there was a rodent problem, but it was on 10 acres or something close to that, a beautiful plot of land. My girlfriend falls in love with this place. It's 215,000. Yeah, not gonna go for something that's that bad. I work construction and I don't want to come home to then work again. Now, my girlfriend's friend, let's call her Patricia. Sounds like a female dog name. I never bothered trying to remember her real one. Offered to buy the place and then sell it to us later. Yeah, no. She said we'll talk about it, but I stand on a hard no, and then my girlfriend tells Patricia no. Patricia and her boyfriend, Mitch, that's his actual name. I don't care if he sees this. In fact, I hope they do. Wow, that is a rarity for someone on Reddit to say, no, that is his actual name. No fake names here, and I hope you see this. Already bought the house, thinking we'd buy it from them for more than the 215k. But okay, cool. My girlfriend has her friend moving out here that she's known since she was 3. I told them that if they buy the materials and the tools, and I keep the tools when they're done, I'll do the work for them for no additional cost, because I lost all my tools when we moved. Now, this Mitch guy trashes all over me about how he works in finance and doesn't need any help. Okay, whatever. I tell him what he needs to work on first because there are major issues, but I get pooped on again. Okay, let's talk about my girlfriend now. So she has PTSD, BPD, and a couple of other things that I don't remember off the top of my head. She struggles to make friends, so this is a big deal for her. She is super excited. So when they get here, they don't visit her. They don't give any idea that they talk every day and every night, but then they get here and they block her on everything. It absolutely destroys her because she doesn't understand what she did wrong. Now, they were upset and were cussing her out because she apparently tricked them into buying the place. She didn't. I told them not to because I was never going to say yes. Now, fast forward a year or so. They're on Facebook complaining about all the issues that I pointed out were issues they'd need to fix. So this actual crackhead Mitch is cussing us out. Now, I am just tired of this at this point. So I call the city and pretty much rat them out. I say they have plumbing issues, electrical issues, the roof and the floor is caving in, support issues, rodent problem, all of which can get it condemned. So guess what happened? I made a complaint and got it condemned. Then I went to his place of work and filed a report with corporate about his drug issues because he's a financial advisor at a bank and I don't think he should be anywhere near anyone else's money. I hope they enjoy 215,000 worth of debt with no job and nowhere to stay because I'm done getting cussed out and having them drag my girlfriend's name through the mud because they thought they could jack up the price and sell it to us. Damn, what great friends they must be, trying to buy a house for you, but in reality, just charge you more than the original price of the house. Terrible people. What I hope is that when the bank gets hold of this house, repossesses it, that they kind of, I don't know, look to resell it to somebody like you for less than the original price. I think what you then probably have to do is just knock it all down and start again. It sounds like there are so many issues here that aren't even worth bothering with. So maybe you'd have to do that, and it probably would be a lot of work. If you can make it work and the price is not too expensive, it does sound like it's a beautiful property, and I feel like you've gone through enough now to warrant that level of extra effort if you can be bothered. But yeah, as for the story, just from what I've read, all I can say is that they're just terrible people. Imagine that, saying, oh, I can't wait to move to your town. It's going to be so fun. We're talking every night, like so excited to come down, spend loads of time together. And also, like, I'm doing you such a favor by buying this house for you. We'll be in it for a short time. Then look, we'll sell it to you for a cheaper price. Just we'll make sure it's ready for you and no one else gets it. Then just blocking them and saying, oh, actually, you can't have the house. And also, why did you force us to buy it? Great friends right there. Not going to pay me overtime? Think again. I was discussing this sub with a good friend, and he said, boy, have I got a story that will fit. Now, it wasn't his story, but his brother's, and I sat with him and got the details. Buckle up, it's a good one and a long one. Let's call him Bob. Bob has been fiddling with computers since he was a kid, and knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he's moved from job to job. The employee he worked for was a service/distribution company, and there were 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, for inventory, for payroll and finances, and it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning program, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those of you who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. You can run a report and find out which customer has bought the most part ABC in the last year, which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders. Everyone in the company used the ERP program, but it was very complicated, and they used the aspects of it that related to their position. For example, the receiver would accept a shipment, verify the quantity, confirm it was received, and the inventory stats would be available to the salespeople if they wanted to look up how many were on hand. The receiver didn't care what the price was, or who the vendor was, he just did his job. Now, Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he managed to train most of the employees on their aspects, and after a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Bob still got tickets for tweaks in the operation of the software and occasional hardware IT issues. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 AM their time, it would arrive at 6:30 AM Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 PM Vancouver time would arrive at 6 PM. This stretched out the day, so many staff came in early and worked late. Bob would arrive at 8 AM, and there'd be people that demanded his immediate assistance and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly even though their request was submitted before his start time. Same with later in the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. They decided to stagger his and his IT colleague's shift times. Bob would start at 6 AM and work until 2:30, and his colleague would start at 10:30 AM and work till 7. Bob's colleague had kids and refused the shift change. The employer insisted, the colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said they'd looked to hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one that knew the ERP system, and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then he wanted overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This went on for some time, and he knew lots of IT people socially. They told him what the company was offering, and Bob knew that they wouldn't find another tech. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation, and was denied, so he planned to get a new job. Now, here is the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. When a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labour laws states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee that wasn't a manager. all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they had put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line said, "You're legally entitled to overtime pay," and in the body of the email was the lawyer's name. The poop hit the fan. Almost every employee authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work he put in. Instead, they had to pay almost everyone. Okay, great revenge, I'm not gonna lie, but my main takeaway from this, my main emotion, is just feeling bad for just all the employees in general to work for this horrible company. Bob, obviously, on the one hand, having to do not just 2 people's jobs, but more like, it seems like 5 or 6. I mean, those shift times are ridiculous, and he is the only one that knows how this all works. That is such a specialized role that he's not even being paid for properly at all. I mean, it's not even close, it sounds like. And then, all the other employees who were doing overtime, but then haven't been getting paid for it. What if Bob had never done this? They would have just done all those hours and never been given the money for them? It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, shout out Bob for helping out so many employees that were just being completely manipulated and just not given what they deserved. It's just sad that it had to come to that. Crazy. Pay the man the money he's worth for his skill, and this would never ever have happened. But then again, you could also say just pay the employees what they deserve and are owed for the overtime, and they'll probably be more happy as well, and it would just, contribute to a much better working environment, and the company would probably do way better because of it. I don't know. It's just a weird one. I feel like it's backwards policy from a company like this, just trying to, scrimp and save money, when in reality you're expanding, you're clearly doing well. Pay your staff more and they'll pay it back to you in terms of output, and yeah, the company will just do better. I don't know. It's just weird business practice, isn't it, really? But great revenge nonetheless. I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life 20 plus years ago, and I just made sure it stayed ruined. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake, then a 23-year-old man, through mutual friends. He had already graduated and was planning to move to the opposite side of the United States for grad school, and I'd already been making plans to move with friends only a 90-minute drive away from where he was moving to. We had so much in common, fell in love, and it really seemed like fate, both planning to move 3,000 miles and landing so close together. He had 2 sisters and a younger brother who were all awesome people, and I became instant friends with them as well. Because he was in school and I was working, I would usually go to him to hang out on the weekends. He was renting a house with 2 roommates, also in his program. We were young, so money was tight, but we had fun, went for taco dates, and spent a lot of time at his house where he was breeding and selling small animals. Jake was an animal sciences PhD student, so being around animals was normal, and I loved it. I met and became friends with his advisor's wife, Mary, who was in her mid-50s, who worked in administration at the university. She is a lovely woman. I'd often have lunch with her when I went over on the weekends. Jake was a teaching assistant, and I met other people in the program and made friends with them faster than he did. After about 2 years of dating, I was at the house one day, laying in bed together, in a state of some undress, and he said, out of the blue, he was concerned I'd been gaining weight and it made it harder for him to be attracted to me. No concern about my health, it was all about him finding me unattractive. I sat up and said, well, then maybe you should make sure there's better food for me to eat than crackers and cheese when I come up on weekends. Even at 23, I didn't take that kind of BS. I had gained maybe 10 pounds since meeting him 2 years earlier and still wore the same size clothes, about a US size 6 to 8. I wasn't going to engage in a fight about it after all. It was his problem, not mine, so I asked him calmly, what is your solution to this? He stared at me blankly and said, well, I guess that you should try to lose weight. And I said, nah, I'm not going to do that, so what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I guess nothing. I wanted to let you know how I feel. And I said, cool, thank you. Put my clothes back on, went to sleep, and drove home the next day as usual. We keep dating, and about 3 months later, he called me and said he wanted to break up after close to 3 years. The reason, and I quote, you don't know enough about science. He felt like he couldn't have a conversation with me about his work where he didn't have to use common names for animals instead of scientific ones. I said, well, that's bull. What's the real reason? He said it was the real reason. He came to see me a month later to return something of mine, and I confronted him. demanding the real reason. He finally admitted that he'd been seeing one of his undergrad students. Let's call her Meg, a 19-year-old. He was then 26 and her teacher. I screamed at him to leave. My roommate threatened to throw him off our second floor balcony if he didn't go, and he left. It hit me all at once after he walked out, and I went from rage to stunned laughter. I'd actually met Meg a few times, and at one point, she was at his house for a barbecue and spilled something all over her pants. Jake asked me if I could loan her some sweats. Now I couldn't because I was a size 8, and she was a size 18. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but the point is, I realized he made those comments about my weight to try and get me to break up with him because he was a coward. He clearly liked a big girl. Although, when he said those things to me about my weight, it was 1 a.m. I lived about 95 miles away, and we just had sex, so I don't know how he thought that would go. Even in hindsight, it perplexes me. Did he think I was going to break up with him and storm off into the night and drive for an hour and a half? Anyway, I emailed his roommates. It was the early 2000s. It's how you communicated anything you didn't want to say on the phone. I wanted to let them know that we'd broken up, and they were always lovely to me, and I thanked them for being friends. They both admitted, though, that they knew about Meg and were the ones to demand that Jake tell me, or they would. That is when he broke up with me with the lame, you don't understand science excuse. One of his roommates, a super nice, super cute guy named George, offered to help me get a few things still at their house that he collected for me away from around the house. He suggested I come up for the weekend. We go out and drink, have a good time, all the things that Jake didn't want to waste money on, and I said, sure. So I went up and George let me into the house while Jake was gone. I took photos of all of his animals because while I might not be a PhD student, I paid attention and I knew he had an endangered species in his care. He wasn't breeding it, it was an unreleasable animal that he'd taken in from a rescue organization. There was paperwork he had to submit with a $25 fee, and he refused to do it, saying he didn't want the government in his business. I took photos of that animal, all his breeding conditions, and a photo of an animal not allowed in the state, which was in a tank right next to a window and visible from outside. I then went out for a night on the town with George. We stumbled in early, around midnight, so Jake and Meg, who were watching TV, would see me in a short dress, drunk, and George practically carrying me. I spent the night in George's room. He was a total gentleman, but made sure to leave the room and parade past them in his boxers a few times, and we giggled and moaned loudly so they could hear us. When I went to leave the next morning, Jake said I didn't have to act like a whore in front of him as I ate a donut slowly in my rumpled dress with messy hair, while George beamed at me and then planted a kiss on my forehead. Meg looked ashamed, not quite knowing where to look, and I said, have fun with my leftovers, and walked out. I wanted to think that the petty, loud hookup and a few juvenile insults was my revenge. It was not. The next day I had my photos developed, the good old days, and I called the State Office of Fish and Wildlife. I reported the animals in the house, the potential overcrowding of breeding animals, and the 2 animals he shouldn't legally have at all in the state, and I asked them how to make a report. Well, it turns out that Jake wasn't well liked by his peers in his program, or by his roommates, but I was. George had suggested that he and their other roommate could submit complaints to the university that a TA was sleeping with one of his students and showing her favoritism. The night we were out at the bars, we made sure to tell the story to anyone who they knew. They made sure all the women in his classes knew he was sleeping with Meg. It wasn't a large program. People knew fast that he cheated and was now dating a student. George and the other roommate made sure people knew they had put in complaints. They were sick of Jake's entitled BS. With my full statement made and photos sent to the state wildlife officials, I called my friend Mary, Jake's advisor's wife. She knew about the breakup and the lame reason, and I let her know that he admitted he was sleeping with a student. I'd been emailing with him and he admitted to it in writing, so I sent that to Mary. To say she was not happy about that was an understatement. She said she made sure it would be investigated and told her husband, Jake's direct advisor, while I was on the phone with her. Speaking of investigations, a few weeks later, George called me, giddy, to say that state fish and wildlife officials were there confiscating the animals. He told them he'd be happy to tell them whatever they needed to know. Meg was there when it happened and told the officials that as far as she knew, all the animals belonged to her boyfriend Jake and that they were all legal. That put George and the other roommate in the clear. One animal was kept in the backyard, so it was implied to Jake that a neighbour reported it. While they were there to investigate, they knew to look in the back window to see the far more problematic, illegal to have in the state under nearly any circumstances, animal. Since George was on the lease, he was able to let them in to investigate in the house. The animals were all in communal areas, and the officers stayed there for a few hours and returned with a warrant to take all the animals and enter Jake's room to investigate. George and the other roommate let them into their rooms with no issues, and they were quickly cleared. Meg apparently couldn't get a hold of Jake, and eventually drove to the university to find him. Remember, no cell phones yet. It was a good day. The only animals they left were some guppies in a fish tank. Now, PhD students need grant money to do research, and a large part of animal studies funding comes from the federal government. Jake had just gotten an EPA grant right around when he broke up with me. So I called the EPA and asked how I would report that a person with a federal grant was being investigated for illegally harboring endangered animals. Long story short, he lost his EPA grant and had to make restitution on what had already been used, close to $30,000. He would never be able to get another federal grant. He avoided jail time on the state charges since all the animals were in good health, but lost all his breeding animals, worth thousands of dollars, since they were collected for safekeeping during the investigation when the 2 illegal animals were taken. In the end, he owed a $15,000 fine, and the 2 animals went to a nearby nature center. For years, I would stop by if I was in the area to visit them. The university revoked his scholarship and fired him from teaching for having an inappropriate relationship with a student. He somehow escaped being expelled, but it always shocked me that he never tried to hide the relationship with Meg and was so stupidly self-assured that he didn't even wait the 4 weeks until she would have been done with his class to start publicly dating her. By the university rules, he would have then been in the clear to date her, not being her teacher anymore, and she would just have to avoid any classes he was a TA in. It never fails to make me laugh. After a few months, I emailed his sisters and told them I missed them because Jake broke up with me after trying to call me fat and cheating on me, and I felt weird contacting them. The girls told me that he told the family I broke up with him because of the distance. I forwarded them emails that Jake wrote after the breakup, talking about how he fell for Meg and he was sorry about it, but it was true. I couldn't keep up with him academically, and it made him attracted to Meg. Jake managed to convince his dad to pay for 1 more year of school so that he could get a master's instead of a PhD. And while I stayed in contact with his sisters and brother via email and then social media, I largely let it all go. I got even, I made some friends, Mary became like an auntie to me, and I went on with life. I went on to get a master's degree myself, and my speciality, helping scientists and doctors communicate their work to lay people. You know, us dummies who can't remember all the scientific names. I swear, it happened by accident, not design, but I love it. And I work with everyone from small-town doctors and nurses, to pharmaceutical companies, to museums, to state and federal governments, to film and TV producers. I travel a lot and speak and get to learn a lot of cool things about our planet and how things work. That is amazing. I knew through his siblings that Jake and Meg got married and had 2 kids. Meg dropped out of the sciences and became an accountant. Jake went back to breeding animals. Every once in a while, his sisters or brother would tell me something over a lunch or via text, but we had our own relationship that exists outside of him. Apparently, when I sent a wedding gift for one of his sisters, he loudly complained at a co-ed bridal shower that all of his siblings still were my friend and didn't make an effort to embrace his now wife, Meg. Apparently, the sister just laughed and said, "I don't make it a habit to be friends with homewreckers." This is how Jake's parents found out how their relationship started and ours ended, truthfully, 10 years after we broke up. Jake never found out I was behind reporting him to the state, and in the end, I didn't lie about a single thing, except maybe exaggerating a drunken makeout session with George, who is now a successful and tenured professor with a lovely wife and daughters. Now, fast forward about 20 years to a few weeks ago. I was at a university giving a lecture to a room of 250 undergrad and grad students. In the end, I was mingling with the students afterwards, and I hear a voice say, "Hey, OP, long time no see," and I realize it's Jake. And my facial expression did not change at all. I was completely shocked, but my instinct was to play dumb. So I said, "I'm sorry, help me out. Have we met at another workshop or lecture?" He looked incredulous and said, "It's me, Jake." And I said, "I can't place you, but I'd love to figure it out." Finally, I gasped and said, "Oh my goodness, Jake, I guess I blocked you out. And I said, well, lovely to see you. And I moved on quickly when he tried to reach out and hug me. I was happy to leave it there, with the satisfaction of him seeing me as a guest lecturer in a science department of a major university when he was just in the audience. The department chair and faculty who'd invited me to speak took me out to dinner, and while there, one of them said, "So, you know Jake?" I said I did from over 20 years ago, being vague about how. She went on to tell me that he had been there for an interview for a teaching position and had spent a few days there observing, and they were likely going to hire him. I couldn't control it. I scoffed. When they all looked at me, I said, "I'm sorry. I'm just shocked that he's teaching after what happened back at university." They said, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, he was sleeping with a 19-year-old student when he was 26, and he had to leave the program without a PhD because he couldn't afford to stay after losing his scholarship." The 3 people I was with all looked at each other like they knew they had a problem and said, "Wow, we'll have to look into that," and changed the subject. My old friend Mary, retired a year or 2 now but still friendly with her old colleagues, called me this weekend to say a friend at the university let her know that someone had called doing a background check about Jake, and they pulled his file, which included being fired, leaving the program with a lower degree, and the complaint letters from over 20 years ago about his conduct. Mary's name had been on it, with her husband listed as the faculty advisor, so she thought that she'd like to know. As a bonus, it had a copy of his arrest record for the illegal animals. I guess his dad had paid for a decent lawyer to get the record expunged after the charges were reduced, and he paid the fines so it doesn't show up on a standard background check. I don't think he's going to get that job. So, I will return to my life, content that the universe comes through sometimes, especially if you give it a little nudge just now and then. The best revenge is when you don't have to do anything wrong, you just have to help direct knowledge to the right places. If there is anything I can impart to any young women and men reading this, as I shimmy happily into my now size 10 pants, it's that if someone who is supposed to love you complains about your weight or looks, that is their problem to fix mentally, not yours. And maybe it's time to check out what they are doing behind your back, or simply move on. Remember though, it's their flaw, not yours. If Jake hadn't been a coward and tried to make me break up with him and just ended things with me in a mature way, I might not have found out about Meg and turned his own wickedness back on himself. Okay, and there we go. That is the end of that one. Wow. First thing I've got to say is fantastic revenge. Very much justified. There is absolutely no way this guy should ever be allowed to work in any form of education again. He completely ruined that chance by having a relationship as a TA with one of the students. That is my immediate conclusion from that, and I'm very happy, to be fair, that you've made sure and you continue to ensure that that won't happen. Now, the next point is, and I want to ask your thoughts on this, guys. Do you think that this guy, Jake, should still be getting punished 20 years later for mistakes that he made 20 years ago? Do you think that's a little bit too long? I mean, do we still punish him 80 years later for these mistakes? Are you allowed to make mistakes and, you know, be punished for them? Sure. But ultimately, I'm playing devil's advocate here slightly, but he's done nothing illegal, yet his life is still being ruined 20 years later. Is that not a little bit harsh, or is that justice for what he did? I mean, we don't know the effect that it had on the 19-year-old. Clearly, you know, he's abused that level of power there, and who knows what effect it's had on the girl. But you get what I'm saying? 20 years later, still getting punished for something he did when he was half his age? I don't know. Seems perhaps a little bit harsh, but I think it's potentially fair. I also do think that OP, like, let's just make sure that she definitely has moved on and it's not still kind of trauma in her mind. Yes, it's great to make sure that someone has the revenge they deserve, but 20 years of this, not saying that, you know, she's done loads and it's always on her mind. Just I want to make sure that she has moved on with her life. I feel like by the end we're getting towards that stage, but I don't want it to be an ongoing thing for the rest of her life. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a little bit too much for it to still be going on now. I think now's the time to leave it. Or do we carry on and just ruin this guy's life forever? Give me some like real actual answers in the comments. Not just, oh, he did a terrible thing, he deserves for his entire life to be ruined for 80 years and then die. Let's be realistic, okay? I want to hear some actual logic and some cohesive thoughts, which to be fair, you guys always give me. There's no need for me to say that, but you get what I'm saying. I mean, you could also say that, you know, the revenge was at the time good. You told the correct authorities, the school, the whatever it's called, fish and animal people, the people that deal with the animals, about what was going on. They came and dealt with it. That was it. And again, I have to maintain, he should not work in a school again. But outside of that, I don't know if he still deserves to be getting punished. Maybe he does. I'm not completely decided, to be honest. I actually reckon he probably does. But it is just harsh. But, you know, if you are the sort of person that would do this, yeah, maybe you do deserve to be punished forever. I don't know, like people in the comments are saying that ultimately what he did was cheat on you in the 90s with a woman over the age of consent, over the legal age. So it's a bad move, but it's not a crime. Now, does he deserve to be punished 20 years later? Even if he was the TA. People are saying that, you know, what you did with George OP was fantastic, and I agree, that was brilliant. No doubt about that. And maybe even staying friends with the family is fine as well. Although, to be fair, a little bit weird 20 years later. But yeah, like devastating the dude's entire life, ruining his career, continuing to do damage for decades afterwards. After he's like worked his way back up from nothing, and it seems as if he's trying to live a proper life. And he's still not doing that well, right? I mean, he's applying for jobs that he probably should be, you know, a level ahead of by his 40s. And I don't know, maybe it's just a little bit too much. Again, maybe I'm just waffling here. Let me know in the comments down below. You guys are the voice of reason on this channel, not me. Got rude guy arrested for suspended license. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows up and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal, we were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know that we want to play the next game, but this jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in that she wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman. Some more time goes by and the guy leaves the table. We see our chance to get in. We put the quarters in and the balls are dispensed, except the green 6 ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point it was ridiculous and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30 and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so we didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so that we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows that we realised what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on it and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make and model and colour, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close as he was visiting a neighbourhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned on his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrest of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. Well, there we go. Dealt with phenomenally well. I'm actually quite interested to know how this guy wasn't done for drink driving. Maybe he did just have a couple of drinks and that was all. But still, I'm not sure I'd necessarily advocate that, even though it's within the limit, just about. But yeah, good to see that you guys got some justice, because what kind of guy does this? I mean, seriously. Like, fair enough if you want to play an extra game. I mean, is that even fair? I'm not sure. You know, if you want to play 2 games and you say to people, listen, I know that you're waiting, but I really just want to play another game. No, I mean, even then, you should just give the table up. Sorry, you should. But then what he did after that, taking the green ball to the toilet. I mean, what? I've never heard of someone doing that. And then ruining the game, the next game, by chucking it on the table just for the sake of it. Why? I think he deserves to be arrested just for that pettiness and just being a jerk in general. Good revenge. Okay, that's going to do it for the first story of revenge in this episode. Let's move on to the second. Now, I want to give a little bit of context here because it might seem like it's a little bit boring and professional and mundane. But trust me, this isn't one of those. It's really, really good and the justice is excellent. It's definitely one of the most well-written pieces that I've read in a while. And it's about someone that we all kind of hate, right? Landlords. I think we can all generally agree that landlords aren't the best. They're sometimes extremely difficult to work with and yeah, deal with. But you may think that residential landlords are bad. Actually, in this situation, we have a story about a commercial landlord who was absolutely horrible. Without further ado, let's get into it. A lawyer's pro-revenge on a landlord. Landlords are jerks, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they are nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could see a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts." I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an old lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him and we hated each other on site. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out. Instead, they just change the locks and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of trash going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was. The usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. From the wording of the demand, it looks like you've been fighting a while. Why did you wait before consulting a lawyer? I asked one of the lawyers I know and he said it's hopeless. He told me the lawyer's name. It was a guy I knew with a trashy real estate practice who'd resorted to taking little legal aid cases to keep the lights on when the market tanked in '89. "Did you do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked. Because this is a bit over the top, even for our jerk landlord. "He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault." "He won't let you take it with you?" "Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The jerk landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue." "Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of a renewal of an assignment of a renewal, the original documents dating back to shortly after World War II when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow, the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of the term. That is crazy. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. To be fair, moral of the story so far is you've got to read the contract in full for anything like this because, wow, being personally liable for a 100-ton vault is crazy. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the jerk landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm screwed, right? You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask." "Well, I can save you, but it's going to cost." "How much?" $5,000 in legals and another G note for the agent. "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years and he knew me pretty well. "You pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked. "Yep, but nothing that will get you into trouble." "Alright, I know a guy." Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said. "Why?" "For lunch, and to be a jerk. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. That's pretty elite, by the way, I've got to say. Imagine that. Sitting in a vault, having pasta, drinking red wine. That's like movie scene right there, but I guess the circumstances aren't great, to be honest. So I said, "We're making demand on the landlord," munching on spaghetti carbonara. "Demand? What are we demanding?" I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. "We're demanding that the jerk landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course, I don't want that." But I shook my head. "You need the vault," I said. "And we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? Well, we'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now." The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. "You already gave it to him," he said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. "Let's see what the landlord has to say," I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating wolfishly and with his hands. "My client needs an answer today," I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. "I'm the vault's lawyer," I said. "I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements." "Your client could forget about the bank vault," he said, wiping his massive greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. "But you can't do that," I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. "I'm the landlord. I can do what I want." "I'm going to need that in writing because my client might sue," I said. "Sue all you like," the landlord told me. "Sue till you're blue in the face." He told me that I'd have a formal response by the day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. "How the heck did you do that?" "Trade secret," I said. The following month, the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I'd always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place the Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. "The landlord's looking for you," he said. "Oh yeah? What about?" "He's really angry. He said his deal fell through." "Deal?" "He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up." "And what's that got to do with me?" I said to Aaron. And I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. "I know you were behind this," he said, his jowls quivering. "I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all BS. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that freaking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm gonna have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you." He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad "for rent" sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. So there we go. That is without a doubt one of the best revenge stories I've read in a long time. That was brilliant from beginning to end. What might have been potentially a kind of boring topic, landlords and contracts and that sort of stuff, maybe not the most entertaining, so well written and really good. This guy clearly is just a horrible, greedy man that, any sort of idea of, can I make some more money from a new bank potentially coming in? He was all for it, not even checking if they were even a real bank in the first place or doing any sort of due diligence there and working out what was going on. Doesn't really surprise me when he's just as selfish as this, forcing somebody to take a 100 100-ton vault with them or he'll sue. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. I guess this comes down to you have to leave the property in the same way it was when you first got it. But I don't know how anyone would realistically know that, first of all, there was a huge 100-ton vault. And then secondly, that you had to get rid of it when you left, because when you moved in, it was there, right? But again, as was explained in this one, going back to the Second World War and having a contract carryover from there is extremely petty. I do kind of stand by what I said, though. I do think with all these things, you've got to read literally, I was going to say word for word, but almost letter for letter. Like the punctuation even is extremely important in these sort of contracts to make sure you're not getting absolutely shafted like this guy did. But yeah, if it wasn't for you, OP, I mean, that would have been terrible. But thank goodness that people like you exist and just exploited the guy that was exploiting this unlucky individual. And now for our final pro-revenge story of this episode, just a quick little one to finish. Steal furniture, almost lose your job. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were for the most part decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed, but they didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP and then only pay half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cut to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them, asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe. And when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with "good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything, from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son, cursing at him, asking him what he thought he was doing, contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him, only for him to attempt to ring 10 times afterwards. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. There we go, a nice little one to finish on there. I do have to say that it's embarrassing that these healthy, Christian people who work for the church have this attitude. Does that not go exactly against what they're preaching? Surely it does. Like, how can they go to work each day? Like, you're a pastor, and you are going to work each day preaching, knowing that you're doing this at the same time. How can you live with yourself? I think it's kind of people like this sometimes that give not just the church, not just the Christian church, but just religion in general a bad name, when in reality it's just these horrible individuals doing things. But then you hear stories like this quite often, and you're just like, why? How can somebody be in this position and do something like this? But I guess it happens all over the world in every single sector. But yeah, normally, like, I thought that the church would usually pay for their residents, but I don't know. Maybe they weren't, or maybe they were, and these two were just, pocketing that and then just, using it for whatever they wanted. I will say though, shout out your dad, because he is a very, very good man. Sister wants to walk down the aisle at my wedding. We use that to our advantage. Here I am, writing this long tale on my honeymoon, but it does feel cathartic to finally type it out. And my husband is way more excited about this than the resort drinks. Anyway, this is a throwaway account because I don't have a Reddit account, and my husband, the Reddit fanatic, said he doesn't want this associated with his main. As to why the Reddit guy isn't the one writing this, it's because he said, since it's my family, I should be the one with the honor of posting the story. But he is looking over my shoulder to help out. So, I think first it's necessary to give some background to explain how this behavior reached this level. and why our responses were as they were. So ever since I could remember, my parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe it. Even if there was undeniable proof, they'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavour that she wanted. Hers did not. And my parents always denied knowing that I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. But at first, she mostly ignored me, and then it got really bad when we were young teens. I'm not sure what the cause and effect are, but she found herself with no friends and her behaviour got worse. Did her friends move? Did they ditch her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never close, and my parents loved to boast about her achievements, but never ever mentioned any of her issues. Whereas with me, they loved to bring out any flaws of mine constantly as teasing material. I only knew she had none because we went to the same school and I noticed her no longer walking around with people. So anyway, she had no friends, and I did. I actually used to be decently popular. My sister realised that, and suddenly I stopped being the occasional punching bag to a hated person that she needed to take down at all times. She started accusing me of more stuff. She accused my friends of more stuff. My parents stopped allowing me to hang out with anyone, the excuses ranging from, they're not good people according to your sister, to, why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time? What saved me from complete isolation was my extended family. Most of my family lived in the same hometown, and I got along with my cousins despite some age difference. At one gathering, they invited me over to something, I don't remember what, and I sadly replied that I'm not allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, my kid self with no filter replied that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Well, that reached the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart. Later I was scolded for lying and I was grounded, as if I had anywhere to go, for a month. But after that they allowed me some leeway, so it was worth it. And my sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of extended family knowing her social status was bad, she demanded to be changed. And my parents immediately obliged, even though it cost them more since the school was further away. But she made friends at the new school. However, she never went back to the previous status quo of mostly ignoring me. I guess having felt the power of how badly she could screw with me and anger that I told family she had no friends, she never let me go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me, and my parents called it light teasing. I never called friends over because my parents were awful hosts of them, or my sister would accuse them of taking stuff and they'd believe it. I did become close to my cousins though, since my parents never dared do any of that to family. And then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home at all, but my parents insisted. Well, at one point we were separated and he came to find me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. By which he meant she came over with skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes really badly, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He was irked and ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different tale, that my boyfriend had instead tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused, since how could she do that to me? And guess who my parents believed? Now, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him, for a mean reason. But remember that back then I was a teen and suffering from the unfair bad treatment. I was very resentful and moody, and now hated my sister as much as she hated me. Well, that surely is fair enough. Anyway, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they weren't relevant. My parents were, well, are overweight. And since they like showing love via food, giving you more food, buying treats, etc., my sister was and is also overweight, whereas I was and am not. In fact, I've always been kind of skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is though. But my sister even then was already rude and spoiled. Even her flirting attempts were bad because she never learned to work for anything since she could demand and my parents would deliver. Added to that, the fact that she didn't look like some sexy model, even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe that my boyfriend would try and cheat on me with her. Ah, I see. Anyways, my parents prohibited me from dating such a horrible boy. I did try to keep going in secret, but it was hard and the relationship ended. I did get another, but again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Again, my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this happened again, but they decided that that meant I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo-Juliet situation and fizzled out again. I would eventually get called a S-word in high school, as I was fine with making out with boys and such, but refused to have relationships. Thankfully, that never got back to my sister or parents. My sister did bring one boyfriend home during all this time. He was paraded with pride, and my parents spent every second telling me how good he was. And why couldn't I be like my sister and find myself someone like that? Until he stopped showing up, and suddenly he was a conniving, insert any swear word here, that tricked my sister. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued at this time. She had more spending money, her curfews were much better than mine, she was free to go anywhere at any time while I couldn't. If I pointed that out, my parents would say it's because she's older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment she had. And when I pointed that out, they deny they ever said that or claim it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was, using my sister's accusations against my boyfriend and friends as proof of my bad judgments. Time goes by, and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a college, not a very well regarded one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her achievements were told to me, I don't know which colleges she even tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad in school though, because whenever she got a B, we would celebrate. I would usually get good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming since I always got them, what was there to celebrate? My parents, naturally, made a lot of fanfare and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made my life any easier. She'd always come home every other weekend, and somehow stuff kept missing from her room or some other issues she'd think of to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually, my mum came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money to pay for mine. So, it would be better for me to start work immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished uni to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, part of the bills, and rents. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mum said yes, except no. That is, because they were so caring towards me and I had such bad judgment, they would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. I'm not sure how they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my capabilities. Anyway, I didn't bat an eyelid. I simply said, okay. My mum clearly didn't expect that and kept pushing. Maybe she hoped that I'd throw a tantrum so they'd have an excuse to not ever pay for my college, but I said nothing except I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they'd find an excuse to not pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed they'd eventually pay it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I'd been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out, my friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. And study I did, because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came and I worked my butt off and got a scholarship. Not to anywhere like Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievement on social media at the same time I told them. Even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going, as they'd have to explain to family why not. Initially, they were even a little proud and boasting about it. And then I guess my sister got to them, and they changed gears and even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip that my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my saviour. and I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them, and my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, again, they'd have made a fanfare about it. She moved back home, paid no bills or rent, but it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mum, obviously thanks to her pulling strings. This was all sold to me as a source of pride. Oh well. Almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people that say, if I was in X situation, I'd have done something? My husband is the type that really does. I'm the person that is meek and a doormat in any situation, and then can't sleep at night wishing I'd done something, had thought of something witty to say, etc. I'm the person that can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the guy that claps back immediately. He loves drama, in that he loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying, because he won't forgive and forget. He's just stewing something worse for revenge. He is the one that wanted me to post here, and wanted me to post on nuclear revenge as well, but decided what we did wasn't actually nuclear. People were baffled I got together with him. But just because I was incapable, thanks to my upbringing probably, of acting like him, it didn't mean I didn't like him. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend it on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off either, so we could take some long trips during the weekends to manage stuff. Plus, there was some work flexibility, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit too, if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. Well, at this point, my parents naturally demanded they meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but I was having a hard time. The distance had made me think that maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I cancelled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. See, he'd been getting ready for this. He even bought a high quality recorder that he could hide in a pocket to record it all. He was stoked, thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So, off he went alone and excited to meet them, and came back later euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful stuff they wanted. Babe, we can screw them over so bad. There's so many possibilities. I was confused and I wanted to hear the recording, but he, smartly, told me it was better to listen to him first or else I'd misunderstand him. Well, he went there, and instead of the flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding. On one condition: my sister would walk down the aisle on my wedding first in a wedding dress. Their excuses were that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it at my venue, with pictures being taken and the dress, and she'd have a cake later too, etc. And now guys, OP's husband takes over for a second, writing his parts. Hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a ProRevenge / instant karma / nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, she's my wife now, paints me as this quick-witted dude, I admit my neurons all but short-circuited when those folks legit suggested that trash, like some sort of great freaking gift. Even Troy would rather take in the horse a second time, methinks. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I did have a whole catalogue of insults about to spew out, but something in my soul whispered in my ear like the devil: string these idiots along. So I said I needed to think, see how my wife, back then fiance, would react, and then ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Now back to me, the wife. So my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister, with a grin on his face, and had the recording to prove it. I was shocked. The distance had softened how bad they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go this far. Thankfully, my husband insisting on the angle of revenge helped me not go to a bad headspace. We had a blast thinking up ways to screw them over this, from ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother when we decided on a plan. It involved having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, level-headed brother scolded us for it. While he acknowledged he would never be able to convince us from retaliation, he at least showed us something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at danger of getting sued. So we eventually settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be ProRevenge. The rest is all mostly my husband, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me and were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents, said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue, and not wanting family to fall apart would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Then he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure to not say anything, as not only would it be public, well, with our families there, and also I'd be grateful to the help they'd gave me, and that would mollify me. He said my parents looked surprised, but my grown sister started skipping with joy. Literally so, like a kid. So it was accepted. Important to add, my husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment in boyfriends in the past, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them. I was distrustful and controlling and liked to check his phone and stuff to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in any writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. That is genius. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I really were milking them. How? Well, rather than pay for the wedding then lay low, of course, my parents wanted input in everything. For some stuff that meant a lot to me, the songs and colour palette, my husband would convince them to let it go to keep me in line. But since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was game. Or so they thought. What we did was thus. We'd go, say, to check the drink and menu options. We'd then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to also try it out, then sigh and say it's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't get the best options. Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry and they'd pay for the most expensive. Same was done with the photographer. For the flowers, my husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress. We hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, not outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look that good on me. We had planned on saying yes, then simply not using it, but my mum sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof I said okay. We had to go with me refusing in text and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all of this time, they really did keep communications outside of any text. We made sure that had happened by, when my sister tried messaging my husband, have me reply to her. This solidified the I'm controlling and neurotic claims that my husband was making. So they believed it and never risked anything in writing. And maybe some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous woman is extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humour. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted. Also, to really sell that he was with them, my husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus costs on our honeymoon, having this extravagant, expensive wedding, barely spending a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. I think that my husband, okay, he just confirmed that I'm right, was enjoying the whole tricking them more than actually planning our wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws, but here we are. Soon the day came. The plan that my parents, sister and husband had come up with was wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it, and walk down the aisle. By the time that I'd heard what happened, it would be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric from my dress alterations, and my husband took that to my parents' place. My sister still lives with them even now, and showed them as proof that he'd ruined the dress. Then he said he had to go back to me as I was raging and he needed to calm me down, and he'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our actual security hidden at first. As the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out security. A guy that looked like a bodyguard. We told him to not allow my sister in, and even agreed on paying a handsome tip if he didn't reveal that we told him that. Soon the time arrived. My parents got a text that my sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad went and told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without checking with me. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance as if waiting for me. During this, a friend not in the wedding party texted me to get ready. This is because if my husband or bridesmaids took out a phone and started texting, people might notice. This friend was in on the plan. She's my husband's friend. As willing to help stir drama as he is, I didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing. The doors open, and I come in. My dad looked aghast at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you can't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled, "Something came up." There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it loudly asked what happened. I lied and in a teary voice said he told me it wasn't supposed to be me there. Now, that's not what he said, but my husband and I agreed that if he dared leave me, I should say that to make him look the worst possible. As for the tears, I wish I could just say it was my stellar acting, but no. Despite everything, a part of me didn't think he'd go as far as to abandon me there. That the sister thing wasn't true, but an elaborate joke. I don't know. I was hurt, and I still am, so I was sincerely trying not to cry. You know what? I think that's an important part of the story right there. Despite all this elaborate revenge, still, it's drummed into you in that very moment that your dad just clearly doesn't love you as much as your sister, to an unbelievable extent, and that he really is a terrible person for that. I mean, to abandon you like that on the aisle on your wedding day says a lot about him. And to be fair, it vindicates this entire revenge. Let's carry on. Now, that same friend then loudly went, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" So that as many people as possible could hear and spread it. Then went, "I will go and check," and ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from coming back and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point, my mum also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned that he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some apparently left to check too. When I reached my husband though, all was well. He made me feel better, joking my sad face was so real that I deserved an Oscar, and don't worry, he'd rake them over the coals for what they did. We got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I did notice a lot of people leaving then coming back during the party, but nobody dared tell me what was happening. Someone did come and whisper in my husband's ear and he went out. He came back after a while with a thunderous expression, but whispered in my ear that he needed to go and hide somewhere before he broke character and started smiling. Well, what happened is, it worked. The following is the summed account from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I received afterwards. My sister did arrive in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in. Per our agreement, he claimed she must be in the wrong venue because there was already a bride. And yes, we tipped him really well as promised. My dad went there and tried threatening him with police, claiming that he'd never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed to the police since he was hired by us and was just doing his job. My dad realized by then it would be too late and tried to demand that he let my sister in. At this point, my friend came over and started shouting and insulting my sister, asking what was going on, basically stalling. My mum soon came out and eventually other people did too. At this point, the wedding plan was bust. All my parents could do now is damage control, as everyone that learned about it was aghast that they'd try and pull it and screaming and berating them. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret and then threw my husband under the bus. At this point, my husband was summoned. When he came over, he put on his best look of confusion and denied. To quote him, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. He denied having ever agreed to something so ridiculous. When they insisted that he did, he demanded proof, and of course, they couldn't produce any. All text exchanges they could produce were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was scream crying and apparently sat on the floor kicking her legs like a kid. My dad looked like he'd beat my husband, but security and other people held him back. Of course, they said they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then again repeated, why would he ever agree to something so screwed up? He told them a new one about being awful parents, then said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lying get in the way of his wedding, and he went back to me. This is just working out so phenomenally well, I've got to say. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they refused to show me the recording as that was only for security purposes. But some people filmed parts of it. Watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by any and everyone that came out to check the drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of stuff and not believed, to watch them have a taste was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying. My dad kept changing from purple to white. My sister was still on the floor, crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking, why would my husband agree? Why was there no proof? Why do they want my sister to do this at my wedding? And of course, they had no good answer to any of it. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to spare me. And maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it did feel like everyone was making extra effort to be nice, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive stuff they were eating and drinking certainly helps. We had a blast. My husband maintained the forced angry face for only a short while before breaking out in smiles again. After that, we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before going on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did try to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky, as they could then try and cancel them or something, so we refused. Yeah, that's pretty sensible, I'd say. And also, I feel like you've rinsed them for enough at this point. Of course, since that whole thing, the three have tried to contact me. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. Smart thing, my sister did eventually message me. I won't repeat it, as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense. But the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake that fooled them for months. He wants to print that out and put it on our wall, and hoped, but was also certain it would happen, that I'd get cheated on by him. She did also suggest that he was cheating on me with her, actually. What a thing to say. My husband took my phone, screenshotted the call logs, screenshotted my sister's message, screenshotted some messages of my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat. And sent screenshots of messages to him where they called him names and threatened him. But he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" shtick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in said group chat, begging my family for help, as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He begged extended family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they'd failed to ruin my wedding. Then finished neatly with a request that they don't share our locations to avoid my parents sending my sister over, and then claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to F her in our honeymoon suite. Wow. My family assured him they'd take care of it. And indeed, since then, we've had silence. My husband is a little disappointed that my sister didn't disobey, so he could tattle again while tearing her a new butthole. We'll see if it will last. All in all, while I obviously would have preferred to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got them back. Wow, just phenomenal. I mean, what an unbelievable story. A truly wonderful plan that has just paid off so well. I mean, even in your deepest desires and thoughts as to how this could come off, you know, what could eventually happen, what could potentially go wrong, you simply cannot have thought it would have gone as well as it did there. That is genius, so well deserved, and yeah, what a piece of revenge. I think your point at the end, though, is very valid, OP. Obviously, nobody would ever want this, but given the situation and given how terrible your immediate family clearly is, this is the best solution. It really is. Having no evidence there at all to prove what you and your husband did, having the majority of your wedding paid for and having it be really nice is just phenomenal. And yeah, overall, you've made the best out of what is a bad situation, but that was already a given. You were born with your horrible family, nothing you can do about that. So yeah, might as well make this situation just great. So good. I mean, guys, get in the comments down below, or actually, if you're on Spotify, get in the Q&A section as well. You can still comment on Spotify. Do you think that was one of the best pieces of revenge, the most well thought out pieces of revenge that we've ever seen? I think it's got to be up there, surely. Absolutely loved it. Phenomenal stuff. I know I've said phenomenal a lot, but it really was, and now I'm saying phenomenal. That's how phenomenal it really is.